I love my family. Family has always been important to me. Stay-at-home mom, a dad that worked very hard, 2 to 3 jobs a week. He was a worker. If your hands weren't dirty, he said you didn't work today. I'm the oldest. I have a sister, Kelly, and a brother, Ray. It was a really good childhood.
Tracy Wygant comes from a devout Catholic family in upstate New York. In the 1960s, she is a child growing up in an idyllic suburban life.
A lot of neighborhood kids hung out all day on their bikes. My parents had an above-the-ground pool.
My mom would make everybody lemonade and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Everybody came to our house to swim, and people wanted to be in our house.
Including the nuns of St. Mary's from the local convent, who adopt the Wygant family as their own.
They came to our house for picnics. The neighbors would see a carload of nuns getting out and sitting in the back with us and barbecuing.
My dad worked at Mount St. Mary's convent. He was their plumber, and he ended up doing everything. We would go for Mass on Christmas Eve down at their church. Being with these sisters, the Catholic religion, it was constantly there. It's just really special to have them in our lives.
Tracy is so sheltered by her family life, she is tormented when one day she finds herself the target of a bully at school.
There was one instance where we were on the bus and he made fun of her and she started crying. I had a pickle in a jar from a science class experiment that I forgot was in my duffel bag. When he was walking off the bus, I swung my duffel bag and hit him across the back of the head. I'm sure it hurt, and I told him to leave my sister alone.
The problem with me, I was very shy and very timid.
My sister Tracy is the older sister. She's 3 years older than I am. But I really do believe that that is the day where I took on that role of trying to protect her.
When I turned 18, I went to Mount St. Mary's College in Newburgh in 1978, and then I just went into teaching.
Between studying and a part-time job, Tracy doesn't go out much.
When I was in college, I didn't dorm in this school. I wanted to be home.
But one day, when a friend asks her out on a double date, she accepts, and it's a date with destiny.
We decided to go out for dinner, and she comes with a man. He's a very nice-looking man. Brown hair, mustache, because they were big back in those days. And we seemed to talk a lot.
Tracy finds herself ignoring her date and is attracted to her friend's date, whose name is Chris Chanowitz. He's a local guy who works at a commercial offset printers.
He comes from a family of 5 kids. He grew up Catholic in the town of Newburgh, about 10 minutes from where I lived. I did think he was cute.
Tracy doesn't see Chris again until a few months later when she spots him outside a mall in Newburgh.
Kelly and I were going out for dinner, and I pointed Chris out to my sister, and she said, "Go give him your phone number." I remember being very nervous, and I went up to him and I said, "Call me sometime." And he called me the next day.
On their first date, Chris and Tracy go out for pizza and hit it off. Tracy has never had a serious boyfriend, and soon she is falling in love.
I had butterflies in my stomach, and I couldn't eat. I felt that feeling like lovesick or something. And then when I would come out of college, he would leave notes for me on my car. And every week he gave me a rose. I couldn't wait to go to my car and see the note. Like, you know, that was fun. That was like happiness.
Chris liked her because she has a good heart. She's sensitive, she's sweet. She was about to have a career. She treated him really, really well. She made him a priority in her life. He seemed absolutely perfect for her.
On Halloween night, just 8 months after they meet, Chris plans a special surprise.
We were going out to the movies, and he was really late. And I was mad that he was late. And he gave me a plastic pumpkin, and inside was all this candy. And I looked, and there was a box. It was a diamond engagement ring. He never really came out and said, "Would you marry me?" or anything like that. It was like typical me. Took it, put it on, we're getting married. None of the words were said.
We felt happy for Tracy when she got engaged. We did like Chris, and we were happy that he was going to be a part of our family.
It felt good. It felt romantic. We got married in the convent.
I was the maid of honor at Tracy's wedding. Tracy got married at the Dominican Sister Mother House Chapel. We always described it as like being in The Sound of Music. Right in front of you was the Hudson River. It was a dream of my parents for us to get married there.
It was all marble, all white, and all the nuns were there. My limo broke down. We got to the church late, and one of Chris's friends told me that he was upset. He was worried because I was late. And that always made me feel happy, that he cared for me, that he loved me. That made me happy.
Soon, the newlyweds move into an apartment and settle into a routine.
He left the commercial offset printers and he worked for Texaco company, and then he got a job in IBM. I was teaching in Newburgh. I got hired in August of that summer, '84.
Chris works the night shift on an assembly line.
And so I was home every night by myself, and I hated that. My sister, Kelly, and my mom, we would go out shopping on Saturdays. So Friday nights, a lot of times I went and I slept at my parents' house.
Tracy finds her first year especially challenging.
The discipline was so tough on me. I remember cans of crayons being thrown over my head, and it was very, very difficult on me. He went to work with me crying in the bathroom, in the corner, hysterical, like having a nervous breakdown, because the behavior was so bad, and I couldn't get a handle on it. I didn't know what to do. If he gave me some love, some hugs, telling me it's going to be okay, I probably would have been great, because that's all I needed. But he didn't.
Tracy has her heart set on buying land and building her dream home, but it is difficult to save money. Chris gets a second job at a local business as a salesman.
He got a job at a woman's store with all women. And then women would leave notes on his car. It didn't matter if they were pretty, ugly, didn't matter what they looked like, he still flirted with them. Women shouldn't be leaving notes on his car. He's a married man.
Tracy complains to Chris about his flirting, but he doesn't stop.
He never hesitated telling Tracy that other women were looking at him. He did like to make her insecure, because then she clung on to him a little bit more, and he liked that attention.
After 4 years, they're no closer to buying a home, so Tracy and Chris come up with a new plan to save money.
We gave up the apartment, and I went to my parents' house, and he went to his parents' house. We lived off my paycheck and put his in the savings. I just never knew what he made. He never brought a paycheck home and showed me.
Tracy asked him if she could go stay at his parents as well. And he said there was no need for that she was better off in her house, in her own bedroom. We just thought it was all so weird. It was hard on the marriage, and Tracy cried a lot. She wanted to be with him, and he just kept saying to her, "You want a house, don't you? This is what we have to do to get the house."
For 2 years, Tracy and Chris continue their unusual arrangement, seeing each other as much as their busy schedules allow. Finally, their sacrifice pays off. They save enough to buy their own home, or at least Tracy does.
She has to pay for it all. We don't know where he would have the money saved for any of this.
We decided we were going to get a piece of land and put a modular home on there. We put a down payment on a home.
But before they break ground, in front of friends and family, Chris drops a bombshell that will ruin everything.
He told me he was in love with another woman. Her name was Shannon. He said that he was backing out of building a house. It was awful.
So Shannon was a woman who worked at the mall, who Tracy would see him talking to all the time, and never thought he would ever be with her. But what was even more shocking was Tracy's reaction to it. Tracy fell to her knees, held onto his leg, cried, and told him not to leave her.
Being a nice Catholic girl, you don't get divorced. I didn't know what to do.
Tracy Wygant's husband, Chris, has just told her he is having an affair with another woman.
Basically, what I did is put my head in the ground. It was sad. I didn't know where to turn, what to do. I didn't tell my friends.
He was done. But he wasn't done for her.
This is all I got. How am I going to get anything in the future if I don't fight for him?
6 months go by. Tracy continues to live at home, hoping Chris will eventually reconcile.
I had to go and get the money back for the down payment. There was no talk of divorce. And I would go to the church where we got married, and I would go in there by myself and just pray for everything to get better. And I would do that a lot.
And then one day, he shows up at her work unexpectedly.
And he had with him pamphlets for condos. So we started looking at condos. I was hopeful, because why would he do that?
Chris tells her he is no longer seeing the other woman.
I'm thinking everything's back, everything's fine. She doesn't exist anymore. It's done.
Tracy and Chris start afresh, and instead of buying a condo, they find another piece of land.
It's in Walk Hill area, out by the Schwanga Mountains, and we picked out a house from a magazine. It wasn't like he was like, being all sweet and nice. I just settled and just kept going.
Within a few months, Tracy finds out she's pregnant.
When you have a body grown inside of you, it's wonderful and weird at the same time. It was also a very difficult time. We were building a house, and I'm pregnant.
Chris, he's going to be the best. He's going to build a house. He's going to make it bigger and better than everybody else's. Did they have the money for it? No. He hired people he knew, then didn't pay them. They were in debt.
Just as they finish building their new house, their daughter Taylor is born in February 1991.
Come see baby Taylor. This is baby Taylor's first Easter.
She was just absolutely beautiful.
Taylor.
Long Goldilocks hair, gorgeous.
Oatmeal and banana.
Yum, 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 yum.
Tracy goes back to work after 3 months of maternity leave. Chris is on night shift, so he takes care of Taylor during the day.
Chris took Taylor to the zoo, the park. He would meet other people, women with children, and I'm sure that he was flirting with other women. He would fulfill that role of the mother and the father with Taylor, because Tracy was working.
If we were at my sister's for a picnic, he would be with all the kids. And he would knock the parents down and say, oh, I'm down here with their kids, like he was the greatest.
Santa Claus was here. Look at all your presents.
Daddy, can I open some?
Can you open them? Sure can. Merry Christmas. Where's my Merry Christmas kiss?
Years go by, and Taylor grows closer to her dad, who seems to do all the fun things.
Hey, you.
I think most of my field trips, my dad came on as the parent.
Hi, I'm Taylor, and I'm at Macy's Parade. This is the fireman.
During parties, you would find him in the pool with us, having fun. My dad was always involved, always playing with the kids.
Hey, good girl.
But Chris has little time for Tracy, and their marriage suffers.
He said I have a stomach, so no sex. That was awful. We did Nutrisystem, and I got really skinny, and he still said I had a belly.
We felt that he was having an affair because there was just really no desire, no connection. And it was frustrating for me because I knew my sister was believing his lies.
Inside, I'm dying. No intimacy. I would cry and I would beg him, and he would go like this at me. Oh, really?
When her sister Kelly's family visits Disney World, Tracy suggests they join them, hopeful that a vacation might rekindle their intimacy.
Tracy really looked forward to that. The whole family walking around Disney World.
We took out a loan to take Taylor. We were together. And one night I woke up in the middle of the night and he was gone. I don't know where he was.
She said that Chris kept disappearing. We would be waiting for the parade, and he'd say, oh, he's gonna go buy Taylor something, and he'd be gone for hours. She goes, I just have a feeling that he wasn't alone.
I was hoping for a change. I just kept waiting for that miracle to happen.
After they return, and just when Tracy is at her emotional bottom, her sister calls with more devastating news.
She told me that our mom died.
My mom's death was awful for us.
Chris had no choice. He had to be with me during that time. And then I had him go up to the casket and tell my mom not to worry, that he always would be there for me. I had him tell her that. And then it was Thanksgiving weekend. My family has a cabin in the Catskills with a gun club. So Chris says he's going up to the cabin and go hunting. And my sister could not believe that he was leaving me after my mom just died.
He would tell my father that real men don't stay in the cabin. They go off and they get a tent and they sleep in the woods.
Chris and Tracy's dad go to the cabin, but Chris disappears.
Now, Chris had a hunting gun, but he didn't hunt.
And my father, he searched to see if he could find him. And he followed his tracks, and then they just stopped.
There was no tent. He disappeared.
Chris has been picked up on the road outside the cabin by another woman. Someone who Taylor has already met.
My first memory of meeting another woman was going to the Ulster County pool. My dad told me he was going to meet a friend of his from work, and she had a little girl with her too. We remember playing with all of them in the pool. She was a few years younger than me.
Taylor plays with the little girl named Megan on more than one occasion.
We went hiking together one time up in Minnewaska. It was definitely a few times he had me go meet her. He was treating both of us kind of the same. It was bothering me. And she kept calling him Dad.
Tracy's daughter Taylor meets another girl who is calling her father Dad.
He said that she didn't have a father of her own, so he was trying to step into that role for her. And then he would make me pinky swear not to tell my mom anything about what we did.
Taylor told me that her father and her went with this other woman to some falls up by Kingston, New York. And he has her pinky swear not to tell me. And then when I questioned him about it, he just said it was a friend he ran into.
Tracy's a smart person. And I think that somewhere inside, she definitely didn't believe him. But she was so afraid of bringing it to the surface because she didn't want the consequences of what would happen to their marriage.
I was waiting for things to get better. It would get better, it would get better. I hang in there.
I feel like my bridal shower, like shower.
In February of 1998, Taylor celebrates her 7th birthday. By this time, everyone but Tracy seems to be on to Chris.
I think that's the last birthday I remember with my father being there.
We believe that he's living a double life. He is off buying things and telling my husband that he has charge cards that Tracy doesn't know about. And I think he's doing it just to add fuel to all of our fire.
By the time summer arrives, Tracy and Chris have not been intimate for over 4 years.
I thought he was gay for a while. There was a manager at IBM that he kept talking about that was gay, that he hung out with, and also the lack of sex for years. So it was making me think, well, geez, maybe he is gay. I did ask questions, but they were always lies. I was gagging and throwing up. That's how bad I was. Crying. Felt like I didn't have anybody in the world.
In September, at the start of the school year, Chris starts spending time alone in the garage. He tells Tracy that he is working on something special for her.
He said to me, I have a surprise for you. Don't tell your sister about it. And I told her, because I thought it was going to be something romantic.
She just was really excited about it. And I think she felt that it was going to make their marriage better.
I was excited. I couldn't wait for my surprise.
Chris even puts up garbage bags to black out the windows in the garage so that Tracy can't peek.
I heard noises. I don't know exactly what he was doing. We also bought unfinished furniture that he would paint and stain over the years. So it could be something like that. To me, he was working on my surprise. So I didn't want to open the door and ruin it and peek.
Hey, honey.
As the weekend approaches, Chris seems to be more flirtatious.
He picked me up, and I got embarrassed, and I got shy, and I asked him to put me down. He never picked me up before, never. And I was uncomfortable with that because I'm heavy. Within a few hours later, he had me move a ladder. And I thought it was strange that he didn't do it. He had me do it.
That's great. Great.
On the evening of September 12th, 1998, Chris, Tracy, and Taylor arrive home early from a dinner with friends.
He told me about the surprise. He was getting the surprise ready. And I went to the living room while he was out in the garage.
While Taylor sleeps upstairs, Tracy waits in anticipation.
He comes in and gets me and tells me the surprise is ready. He put a blindfold around my eyes, tightened it up.
Chris places an envelope in Tracy's hand.
He told me it was part of the surprise.
She thought maybe it was airline tickets, and she was hoping it was a trip.
And he had to help me out to the garage. I was okay with it because when somebody's going to surprise you, sometimes they do that. They put blindfold on you. He opens the door and then puts me at the first step. So I'm out on the first step. He's behind me. He tells me the surprise is not ready.
Chris leads Tracy back to the couch, removes the blindfold, and she waits again.
He comes back out to the living room and tells me the surprise is ready now. He had to do a couple things. So we go through the same routine. Opens the door, helps me down to the first step.
Come on this way.
It wasn't ready. Again.
No, it's not
We go
ready.
back in. I go right back to the couch.
Finally, the surprise is ready. Chris re-blindfolds Tracy and again places the envelope in her hand.
Now it's just quiet. And I can hear him breathing behind me. Now I'm starting to get suspicious. Now I'm starting to get a little nervous.
He leads her into the garage, and Tracy waits again for what seems like eternity.
My heart was pounding out of my chest. I felt something come down my neck.
Tracy Wygant's husband, Chris, has just slipped a noose over her head.
And my reaction was to hit it off. And I quickly hit the blindfold up off me and looked up, and he was above me, and he had big gloves on. And I saw him holding the rope with a noose. I went into an out of my body experience, like numb. Is this really happening? It could have been a diamond, it could have been a pearls, but it wasn't. It was a noose.
She was seconds away from death. Seconds. He was going to pull Tracy up by the noose. He was going to hold on to it until she was dead.
I looked up and I said to him, "What's going on?" And he let the noose go and he went to the corner of the garage. And he was crying. He said that he was in love with another woman and we have a child.
Tracy doesn't consider that she might still be in danger.
I thought about it more afterwards. Like, how stupid was I thinking that maybe he wouldn't take a gun and shoot me? He could have easily done that. I was shaking at this time and I said, "I'm going to call my sister."
We were sound asleep, and it was Tracy. She was crying hysterically and wanted me to come up there. Like now. I called my father and asked him to come up to Tracy's. And I said, "It's bad news. I bet it's an affair again." I went to the front door, and Chris opened the door. He looked disheveled, tired. He looked like a monster. I turned and saw Tracy sitting on the couch, and she was rocking, and she was crying. So I knelt down next to her, and I said, "Tracy, what's going on? Tell me what's happening." And she said, "He has another woman and a child. Her name is Megan." And I could tell she was trying to process it. And I turned to look at him, and I said to him, that was your surprise? This is your surprise?
Chris sees Tracy's father coming and leaves to go meet him outside.
That gave me the opportunity to say to Tracy, that was your surprise? And she said, no, he tried to hang me in the garage. At that point, I went into the garage area. The windows were all blackened out with black plastic bags. The ladder was standing there, and there was the noose.
She said, Tracy, I have to call the police. I'm begging her not to call the police.
Kelly calls 911.
Everything was definitely surreal that night. Everything seemed to go in slow motion.
Tracy tells Kelly that she asked Chris why he wanted to kill her.
And he said, you made me do this to you. And she said, why? What did I do? What did I do wrong? And he said, you made me do this. You would never let me go. This is bad. This is really bad. I'm very concerned about my sister because I think she's going to have a severe mental breakdown.
Tracy's dad is startled when police arrive on the scene.
And he said, why would you call the police? This is just an affair. And I looked at my father and I said, no, it's not, Dad. He tried to hang her in the garage. At that point, my father just leapt through the air and jumped on Chris. And that's when the police quickly grabbed my father and Chris.
The officers escort Chris into another room.
He was pacing and wringing his hands. He kept apologizing. He says, I wanted to do a double suicide. I wanted to kill my wife and then kill myself. I'm like, now you know that's not a double suicide. We call it murder-suicide. I said, well, how are you gonna kill yourself? He says, well, I got a gun. He showed me the gun. It was in a closet, all the way back in the closet. I found the .308 that was in there. I'm like, okay, where's the ammo? I don't know. Okay, and how are you going to off yourself with a gun if there's no ammo available? Something's not right.
Chris is arrested, but only for menacing and endangerment.
He had me move the ladder to get my prints on the ladder. Him having me hold a note was going to be a suicide letter. And he picked me up because he wanted to see how he could pull me to hang me. The police say when the surprise wasn't ready that he was trying to get his nerve up. If he did what he was going to do the first time, maybe even the second, he would have succeeded.
Tracy ended up in a psychiatric hospital.
It's like being hit with a double blow. The love of your life has just tried to kill you. You get out of it, and then he hits you with the other blow that kills your heart, it kills your soul.
The next morning, Kelly races to gain emergency custody of Taylor before Chris makes bail. Tracy Wygant spends a week in a psychiatric hospital trying to understand why her husband tried to kill her.
He wanted to look like I committed suicide.
He wanted to look like the victim. Everybody would have been crying for him and feeling bad for him, and he would have came out victorious.
If Chris had succeeded, he would have avoided a custody battle for Taylor.
He would have got the house. He would have got money from the New York State Teachers Union. They would have been set, and they would have lived happily ever after, the four of them in the house. That was his goal.
It was cheaper to pay for a funeral than a divorce lawyer. I believe she saved her own life.
Tracy would never have divorced him. Even after that night, I don't think she wanted to divorce him.
After Tracy returns home from the hospital, she gets full custody of Taylor and then searches the house for evidence of Chris's double life.
I found special holiday cards, letters, fake divorce papers, mail-in divorces.
I'm sure he was showing his girlfriend that he was going through a divorce.
Proof positive that Chris was seeing other women throughout their marriage.
One card I opened up and it was a Valentine's card and it had a voice. Happy, happy hard day. We love you very much. Love, Kathy and Taylor. So it was not good for me. So my family almost had to bring me back to the hospital. That was hard.
There was a photo of Shannon in Disney World the same time that Tracy, Chris, and Taylor took their Disney World trip. So when he was disappearing, he was meeting Shannon.
February 5th, 1999, 5 months after the attack, a grand jury in Ulster County, New York, upgrades Chris's menacing charge to attempted murder in the 2nd degree.
Usually, the one who is unhappy should be the one that takes a drastic measure. But he wanted to maximize his happiness. He wanted to have everything that they had built together to himself. So she was expendable to him.
Just over a year later, in 2000, they go to trial.
He sat there acting like he did nothing wrong. He was the perfect husband who wanted a divorce. That's it.
He told the jury that he was trying to tell me it was over.
His defense was he was just trying to scare her into a divorce because she never would have left him.
The last time I saw my dad was when we went to court, and it was just for a split second. I was set to testify, give my own statements, and I was halfway through the door, and the judge decided he didn't need my testimony, so I was immediately scooched back and out of the room.
Tracy and Kelly take the stand, but the evidence is airtight.
I was in a little bit of a fighting spirit at that time, but still very timid, still beaten up. It was tough with his lawyer, but I held my own.
What I think went wrong with Chris's plan was that he lost his nerve. But I also think that he could have done it.
By unanimous vote, a jury finds Chris Chanowitz guilty of attempted murder, and he is sentenced to 15 years in prison.
I was looking at him when I read my victim response for the sentencing. He wouldn't let me look at him because it was very heartfelt. I cried. Yeah, I was upset. I cried. I did that for a couple weeks.
Tracy and Taylor sell the house and start rebuilding their lives in a new home.
I am proud of how Tracy came out of this. For the last 25 years, she has built a little life for her and Taylor in this house. She has made it a showstopper. People stop and take pictures. She does gardening outside. And that has been her sanctuary.
After serving 13 years, Chris gets out of jail in 2013 and moves back to Wallkill.
I walk up in my front yard to go do something, and there he drives by. We make eye contact sometimes.
I was in Home Depot. I just happened to go around the corner, and there he was. And I started yelling for security. I said there was an attempted murder in the store, and security was running. I told him, you better leave. He almost killed my sister. I was screaming at him on top of my lungs, and he left.
Taylor rejects her father for what he did to her mother. And now Tracy is retired from teaching and has found new love.
Steve worked for the town of Newburgh. He was a fireman for over 50 years. He just loves me so much, and I love him. Matter of fact, I'm missing him right now. He's done so much for me. I hit the jackpot.
She finally has found the perfect man for her who wants to take care of her and who truly, truly loves her. I feel like I have my older sister back.
My mom's very funny. She enjoys goofing off, never really acts her age, always singing and dancing around the house, even if it can drive me crazy sometimes.
I'm able to do it because Steve's in my life. And that's given me the strength. And I think God knows now that I have the strength to do this.
Night falls on the Cape Flats like a curtain that's learned all the old tricks. Slow, heavy, deliberate, smothering the sodium glow of street lamps until they look like distant embers on a dying coastline. Hear that? The wind off the Atlantic, rasping down alleyways, rattling corrugated roofs, tugging at police tape that isn't there anymore. 35 years is a long time for tape to come down and stories to go quiet, but in this neighborhood the word quiet is a costume, and tonight it doesn't fit. The phones are buzzing. Headlines flare across screens like sirens. Cold case, 1990, solved. Arrest shocks community. The world says closure. The locals say, softly, are you sure? It begins, as these things always do, with a sound that doesn't belong. August 1990. Winter in the Cape, the kind that needles your lungs and hones the edge on every rumor. A bus sighs to a halt on Lansdowne Road. Doors wheeze open. A college student with a blue rucksack steps down into the orange wash of light. She is 20, maybe 21, book smart, street careful, a face fixed into the practiced neutrality of someone who knows the city watches. She moves like she's timed to the schedule, left at the barber, right at the spaza shop, cut across the vacant lot before the next gust carries the rain from the sea. Her name, in the reports, will become an echo, Lee, just that, Lee, who hummed radio hooks under her breath while revising civics notes. Lee, who never made it home. One gust. One shadow that looks like two. One dog that won't stop barking. Later, people will say the barking was the first headline. Later, people will swear they saw 3 figures in the lot, then 4, then none. Memory is a lens. Time scratches it until every face blurs. But there's a moment, this you have to feel, not picture, where the air tightens. A drought snaps silence right before the break. The corner flat's TV flickers. The wind drops. A car idles too long on the curb. The barking cuts off like a switch, and the lot swallows a girl with a blue rucksack. Police arrive with notebooks and nightcoats, the old insignia still stitched above the heart. The uniform has changed since then. The city has changed since then. But the procedural dance remains. Cordon, canvas, chalk, the whole ritual of order trying to muscle chaos into a box. A detective in wool gloves lifts a strip of fabric from the grass, bagged, labeled, slid away. His partner oh so careful with footprints until the rain smears them into nonsense. A neighbor woman clutches a blanket around her shoulders and says she heard a whistle like boys do, and then a voice, young, urgent, scared, say, don't. A man with tired eyes swears he saw a white sedan with one taillight dim. Another points toward the train tracks and curls his mouth around a word that means bad luck. Someone mentions a name in a half-whisper, the syllables rolling like dice. The statements contradict and overlap until they form a net too loose to catch anything but fear. The next mornings are papier-mâché, paste and headlines and the weight of them never drying. Missing student, mystery on the flats, family pleads. The photograph they choose for the front page is almost unkind in its hopefulness. Lee at a picnic, hair backlit, teeth reflecting the same sunlight the police say hid the lot in shadow at 5:47 p.m. The phone on the family's hallway table starts to ring in waves, useful information cresting into prank calls, into cruelty, into silence. A volunteer search runs from the church steps, boots squeaking on wet pavement, lines of people sweeping with sticks like they can comb fate into order. They find a belt, they find a bottle cap. They find, weeks later, a blue rucksack caught on the chain-link fence beside the storm channel, zipper snarled like a mouth trying to form the right words and failing. There are suspects. There are always suspects. A boyfriend whose grief looks too tidy in a single photograph. A taxi driver who smokes through his interview and taps his heel one beat fast. A pair of local boys who smirk because smirking is what you do when you're 18 and terrified. The file grows heavier with paper but lighter with certainty. The detectives rotate. The calendar flips. The country itself shifts its weight in history, and everything that isn't right now gets shoved into the cupboard marked later. The cold creeps in. Evidence goes brittle. Witnesses scatter like starlings. One emigrates, one dies. One changes her story because sometimes that's how you survive. Years edit the case down to a paragraph. A name, a date, a family photograph curling at the edges on a corkboard. The lot is paved over. A two-room tuck shop goes up where the grass once lay, selling chips and airtime and the idea that everything moves forward eventually. The storm channel is fenced with a newer, meaner grid. You can walk past it and never feel the vacuum where a life was. But the vacuum keeps its ledger. Dust, DNA, whispers, the city's own hum. Nothing disappears, not really. Technology, that stubborn optimist, grows taller around the case like scaffolding, offering a second chance to the pieces that didn't know how to speak in 1990. A cotton swab in an envelope taped under an old tab, a glass fragment in a brown paper bag, a smear that wasn't blood when it was tested then. Or maybe the machines just weren't listening properly. Quiet things wait for better ears. And then, cut to now, the better ears arrive. They wear lab coats and carry pipettes and talk in a language of probabilities that lands like thunder in the human world. A task force with a name that sounds like a promise, Legacy Homicide, pulls the box from a shelf and spreads its contents like a map across a metal table. Fresh eyes, fresh hands. They feed the old swabs into new mouths of silver and code. They take the curled photo off the corkboard and lay it flat. They build a profile from the residue of an evening, skin cells that clung to fabric, oils that said hello and goodbye in the same minute, the trace of sweat smeared onto a strap in a struggle no one admitted to witnessing. The report lands with the weight of a bell striking noon. A DNA profile, partial but pointed, intersects with a name in a database that didn't exist when the wind first swallowed the word don't. The name has lived here all along, walking among us, a ghost wearing a body. Middle-aged now, ordinary in the practiced way of men who learn to be invisible. A job at a parts warehouse. A cottage with a stoop that needs paint. Church on some Sundays. A car with the same bad taillight problem 3 owners later because history loves to rhyme. He is arrested at dawn when the city's first light is generous and the sirens sound like mourning and relief wrestling in the throat of one morning. The headline writes itself, Cape Town 1990 cold case solved, and the city inhales so sharply the air goes thin. Cameras in the street. A neighbor who says he was quiet, kept to himself. Another who swears she always had a feeling that there was a coldness, like a freezer door opened in summer when he walked by. The family stands in a doorway with their hands folded into each other's hands, faces made of gratitude and weathered stone. Someone says closure again, like it's a key that fits every lock. And still the door doesn't swing all the way open, because the solved part is the part you can print, the rest is the part you feel at 2 a.m. When the house clicks and settles and the wind rehearses 1990 down the street like a rumor with a fresh haircut. The lab's probabilities are clean numbers in a clean font. The street's probabilities are messier. The witness who now says she saw a second man in the lot. The taxi driver who remembers the white sedan is not white anymore, but beige. The blue rucksack mute with all the words it carried. The arrested man's lawyer speaks in steel sentences about contamination, about chain of custody gaps in a country mid-molt, about sweat that migrates and memories that misfile. The detectives answer with timelines like braided rope, with phone records that pulse like an EKG, with a map of the city that draws a straight line through time and chalk and grief until it points to a stoop with peeling paint. Still, there is an itch under the headline, a whisper even in triumph. What took so long? Every year that passed wasn't blank. It was full of birthdays unlit, Christmases that set an extra plate and then put it away, a mother who learned not to wait at the window when buses sighed outside. The city wears its monuments openly, the mountain, the stadium, the giant splash of sunset where the sea meets the edge of the world. But it keeps its memorials tucked away, a blue rucksack in a box, a strip of fabric in a plastic sleeve, a fence that looks ordinary until you know what tried to climb it. And now, the arrest. The word tastes metallic, sure of itself. It bangs its gavel in your ear. But ask the wind. Ask the lot that learned to become a tuck shop. Ask the neighbor who still hears a dog cutting off mid-bark 35 years later. Does an arrest end a sound? Or do some sounds ring on, their echo the true case file that never closes? The cameras will move on. The city will switch conversations. The news vans will drive toward the next headline, dripping urgency like rain off their roofs. Yet the lot remains, paved or not, and the chain link remains, newer or not, and the map in the detectives' heads remains. A city of bright places and dark pockets, of roads that look straight but have memory curves you only feel when you're inside them. So listen again. The wind has dropped. The night holds still, the way it did in August 1990, one breath before. You can hear a single coin roll on concrete somewhere, then fall flat. You can hear the dog that isn't here anymore bark once, ghostly, then retreat. You can hear a young voice, younger than the arrested man will ever be again, saying don't, like it's a password to a door we still can't open from this side. Solved, the headline insists. Solved, the press conference echoes. And in living rooms up and down the Cape Flats, people nod, grateful to the science, to the stubborn detective who refused to let the box gather dust, to the chain of small mercies that delivered a name after 3 long decades. But when they switch off the TV, they stand at their windows a minute longer than they mean to, looking out at a street that looks back, and the night feels not concluded but paused, like a record with the needle hovering, like the wind itself is holding its breath to see if this time, after all that time, the city will finally exhale. Because closure is a headline, memory is a climate, and this case, solved or not, is weather moving in again from the Atlantic, gray and low, the kind that reminds you roofs rattle for a reason, and old tape flaps even after it's gone. The door between then and now has been cracked open. Cold air rolls through the hall. Step closer. Don't blink. We're not done listening yet. Morning edges into the city like a blade warmed over a flame. Clean light, hard lines, no mercy. The arrest has hung in the air all night, like the taste of metal, and dawn only sharpens it. A convoy noses through side streets to the station on Klipfontein, windows dark, doors sealed, the hush around it louder than sirens. Inside, fluorescent tubes hum their indifferent hymn, while a desk fan shivers itself loose on a crooked shelf. You can hear the ocean in the distance if you pretend the city's metronome. You can almost hear August 1990 tapping time under the linoleum. Take a breath. Follow the chain the way the law likes it. Link to link, no gaps, no breaks. A custody officer signs the form with a pen that skips once, twice, a tiny stutter like nerves. A photograph, front, side, flash flares, eyes blink, someone mutters a date that feels like a verdict. The man at the center of it all, ordinary, practiced, unremarkable, is processed into a set of numbers and rectangles, docket, tag, locker. He stands with his shoulders slightly hunched, a posture learned from years of carrying groceries, not guilt. But innocence doesn't change gravity. Everything hangs at weight somewhere. He watches the camera like a mirror that might finally tell the truth. Across the corridor, a room with a metal table becomes the stage. The task force carries in boxes that say history and dust and hope in black marker, and they crack them open with motions that look like prayer. A detective unspools the blue rucksack strap on the table, and the room gets quieter all over again. The fabric is older now, the color dulled to stormwater, but the shape is still the shape, a young life's container, crumpled, emptied, stubbornly here. The strap has been swabbed a dozen times across 3 decades, and still the newer machines found what the older ones couldn't, touch DNA. Transfer DNA, headlines hiding in skin cells, the jargon snaps and pops like a power line in wind. Make it simple, the past left fingerprints made of breath, and science finally learned how to see them. Pause at the whiteboard, timestamps, arrows, a map of intersecting timelines like the tracks of gulls across wet sand. 1739, bus approaches. 1741, doors open. 1743, Lee turns left at the barber, the one with the sun-faded poster, the haircut that never goes out of style. 1745, rain begins, the fine needles that stitch the city together. 1747, vacant lot, dogs, wind, silence. 1812, neighbor calls police. 1829, first response. 1906, cordon. Midnight, search suspended, the chalkboard of a class you never wanted to attend. The detective taps the board with the back of his pen each time he says check, like a metronome for justice, like you can conduct order into being. Back to the interview room, the suspect sits with the kind of stillness that screams. He laces his fingers together on the table, knuckles whitening, then lets them uncurl like they're not his hands at all. His lawyer has the calm of a man who has swum this current often. The file in front of him is clipped at perfect angles. He says the phrases the law requires: chain of custody, probative value, contamination risk, memory fallibility. He says my client like a brick dropped into a pond. No ripples, just a thunk. The detective across from them does not blink when a denial arrives dressed as a shrug. He watches the way the suspect's eyes flick at the word rucksack, the way the tendon jumps once in the throat at the mention of the storm channel, the way silence stretches when he says Lee's name out loud. Silence, in a room like this, is data. Now pull back, aerial view. Cape Town spread under the morning like a map someone forgot to laminate, edges curling in the sea air. The mountain sits there pretending to be impartial, shadowing a city that has always known how to compartmentalize, sea to glass towers, glass to trains, trains to flats, flats to lots, lots to fences that say, keep out in a dialect everyone understands. The tuck shop where the lot used to be clatters open its shutter and a boy in a red hoodie buys a roll of mints with exact change, a small transaction that feels like normalcy doing its best impersonation. But the air hums today. The cashier glances at the corner where the fence still remembers the rucksack and offers a brief prayer he doesn't believe in. He cannot help it. Back to the file. The old notes are written in a hand that loops its letters the way men used to loop their ties, neat, practiced, formal. They call Lee by her full name, surname first, like school registers. They log the witness who said whistle like boys do, and the one who insisted on the white sedan with one bad taillight, not the other way round. They record a rumor about a student politics meeting, a rumored fight, a rumored stalker, a rumored debt. The city is a rumor machine. It processes grief into narrative, slicks it with certainty, and sells it wholesale. The file keeps only what can be stapled. So much was never stapled. A photograph slides free, a footprint in wet soil rendered in grainy black and white, heel defined, toe blurred. The measurement scribbles, length, width, stride, sit in the margin, lonely numbers waiting for their partner. In 1990, there was no partner. In 2025, a database hums awake and offers the nearest shoe model with the confidence of a weatherman on a blue sky day. A work boot common to warehouse floors. Tread pattern that aligns with our whiteboard suspects' employment records. It's not a confession, it's a chorus joining the verse. Each piece of evidence sings louder when it isn't trying to carry the melody alone. Someone uncaps a marker and writes a headline on the glass wall because it helps to be blunt. Cold case, DNA link, arrest. Underneath, smaller, what else? The what else is what burns. The what else is the neighbor girl, 16 then, who left a voicemail last night after the news broke, voice shaking as she said she remembered a scarf, the color of late peaches, snagged on the same fence where the rucksack tangled. That scarf never made the docket. The what else is a retired constable who turned in his badge 2 decades ago and kept one cardboard box in his garage against orders, the way some men keep old uniforms and some men keep old sins. He arrives at the station, hat in hands, and says he couldn't bring himself to incinerate it when the order came. Inside, a tape, a brittle plastic cassette, the kind that requires rewinding with a pencil. Door-to-door audio, the label says, smoke yellowed. The detective who opens it says who even had a recorder, and the retired constable looks at his shoes because back then he did. They find a player in property and evidence, under a tarp, a museum artifact that still knows how to hum. The tape wakes with a hiss like a wave on stones. Voices rise out of the gray. Door creaks, footsteps, a quiet, good evening, a quieter, we're asking about a student. And then a man, voice young and forever, too quick, too eager, too nothing, answering in a way that answers nothing. He says he saw nothing, he heard nothing, he knows nothing, and he says nothing too many times. The sound is warbled, but when the retired constable hears that voice again across 35 years, he does not blink. He says the suspect's name before anyone else does. The room chills by 3 degrees. The tape is not evidence, not in the way a court likes, but it is memory given a spine. It becomes the day's second heartbeat. Phone records were once a walled garden. Now they're a graph. The task force lays a spidery constellation across the table. Call pings, tower arcs, a little galaxy of contact around the lot that night. They cannot place a handset in a hand. Not then, not exactly, but they can show a pattern like the tide. In, out, in, out. A series of calls that pull attention toward the intersection like a riptide. Names surface. The arrested man sits in the center of 2 clusters that do not overlap except there. The overlap is the lot. The overlap is the time. The overlap is the neighbor who heard don't, break room, coffee that tastes like cardboard and adrenaline. A photograph of Lee leans against a jar of sugar, the glass reflecting strip lights into her eyes. Someone sets a note beside it, 3 words, ballpoint, slanted. Keep your promise. No one signs. No one needs to. Promises are the currency of cold case units. Not conviction. Promise. A vow to listen longer than the city can talk. A vow to hold your breath until the truth surfaces or the lungs burn, whichever comes first. Outside, the press writes its own punctuation. Microphones for sale. Outrage on demand. A neighbor who wouldn't normally speak says into a camera that the man seemed fine. Always helped carry groceries, sometimes fixed a hinge, always waved. This is the verse that always follows the chorus. He seemed fine. Fine is an alibi the city hands out for free. The other neighbor refuses on principle, crosses his arms, watches the vans and mutters, "A lot of people seemed fine in 1990. A woman in a green coat places a jam jar of daisies near the fence without saying who they're for. A boy on a BMX leans too long on his handlebars watching uniforms move like chess pieces. The street inhales. The day refuses to exhale. Back to the interview room. The detective slides a photograph across the table, the rucksack strap under magnification, ridge and weave, a topography of touch. He says nothing for a count of 10. Silence grows teeth. The suspect's lawyer asks for water, a defensive ritual. The suspect's eyes catch on the corner of the photograph and stick like a moth obsessed with a bulb. He looks away toward the mirrored glass, toward the version of himself he cannot see. The detective says Lee's name again, softly. Names are keys. Sometimes they open rage, sometimes remorse, sometimes nothing. This time they open a shrug, then a sentence that zigzags, then a denial that arrives too late to be convincing. The tape inside the retired constable's box hisses in someone's pocket like a conscience doing its small electric work. Afternoon, brittle bright, brings the past to the front desk in person. A woman with a church hat walks in carrying a manila folder thick with years. She lays it down like an offering and says she was the neighbor with the blanket back then, the one who heard whistle, like boys do. Inside her folder, clippings, scribbles, a Polaroid of the lot the morning after, and a note she wrote herself the second night. The note says, "Car idled too long, one taillight dull, maybe beige. The color has mutated over time, white to beige to the color of omission. She apologizes for doubting her own eyes. She shouldn't. Memory is a bruise that keeps regretting the doorframe." The detective thanks her like she has returned a stolen thing. Evening closes its fist slowly. Light tints the station windows the color of old honey. The street develops that winter echo of footsteps on cement that turns one passerby into a headline in your throat. The tuck shop rolls down its shutter and the metal rumbles like distant thunder. The mother who once kept watch at her hallway window doesn't do that anymore. She has learned new ways to keep vigil. She sits at a table, television volume low, a cup of tea cooling untouched, and she listens past the announcer to the small sounds of a house that has rehearsed evenings without her daughter for 35 years. She touches the photograph not like its paper but like its skin. She whispers a name for the second time today, and that repetition is itself a ritual, a way of telling the world you will not let it forget. Back at the board, the what else again, a headline in marker, who else? Because men like the one in the interview room rarely move through a night that dark entirely alone. The second figure that looked like a shadow. The whistle that suggested two throats, not one. The second, fainter DNA trace that hinted at a presence the machine cannot yet name. The task force begins to arc their arrows outward from the man in the chair to the periphery where accomplices live like barnacles on a hull. Hard to see, easy to feel when the ship scrapes. Check old shifts at the warehouse. Check associates who sold parts for cash. Check friends who vanished to another province just as the search began. Cold case, but heat spreads. Rain arrives on cue, a thin percussion on the station roof. The city smells like wet metal and last chances. The detective stands by the glass and watches the reflection of the board float over the darkness outside. Arrows in time superimposed on a parking lot where the world keeps returning to park more sorrow. He's been on cases that ended with applause, with champagne in paper cups, with a handshake that meant vacation at last. This isn't that. This is a long chord sustained until the handshakes. This is a march where each step echoes, don't. Not as a plea now, but as a command to the inertia, to the apathy, to the fatigue that eats units like this for breakfast. Don't stop. A call lights the desk phone amber. New lead. The white sedan becomes a file at last. Registration from 1989, sold at auction in 1992, taken by a scrapyard tucked between a scrapyard and a scrapyard, the way certain businesses multiply in certain corners. An inventory sheet lists parts like organs harvested, doors, boot lid, taillights. One taillight returned as defective for dimness. The buyer, a man with the same address the arrested man had in 1993. The ledger doesn't smile when it helps. It only sits there being true. Evidence is not dramatic. It is patient. The detective traces a finger down the page and back up. He hums one note, off-key, like calling a dog that's finally come home. Night climbs the mountain and pours down into the streets, and the city becomes its own shadow. The suspect is moved, doors thunk, keys jangle. The lawyer gathers his perfect angles into a briefcase and walks out under an umbrella, raindrops catching sodium light and shattering. He will be back. The tape with the young voice is logged into property with a number that will not mean anything to anyone outside these walls and everything to those inside. The retired constable leaves with his hands empty, lighter and older both. And you, still listening, feel the city shift on its axis one small degree. Not toward closure, that's a word the press likes better than people do, but toward a reckoning that has waited patient and icy in a cupboard for 3.5 decades. The headline has already run. The anchors have already smiled the way professionals do when a script ends on time. But inside these walls, the script never does. It loops and rethreads. It tugs at its own stitches. The rucksack strap lies on the table like a line drawn across a page. The detective stands over it and thinks about circles that become spirals, that become nooses, that become answers. He thinks about the sound a dog didn't make, and the way the wind sometimes tells the truth by what it refuses to carry. He turns off the light. He leaves the room. The strap stays. The night keeps watch. Tomorrow will ask for more. More names. More arrows. More patience. Tonight is a hinge. The door creaks. The air from 1990 rolls in again, colder than it has any right to be. And in that cold, you can almost hear a new sound cutting through the old. Not pleading, not mourning, but a soft, relentless scratching. Investigation. Waking up the last locked drawer. By sunrise, the rain has sharpened to pins, pricking the city awake, and somewhere between the station's hum and the mountain's mute patience, a new equation takes form. One suspect does not make a night. The whiteboard learns a new verb, radiate. The arrows radiate from his name into jobs, corners, side doors, scrapyards. The scrapyard is a place where stories go to be stripped of paint and sold for parts, and yet it remembers everything. Oil holds memory, ledger lines hold it colder, the address surfaces like a wreck breaching, and a pair of detectives roll down a road lined with exhaust and gravel to a gate that groans open like a tired confession. Inside, rows of skeletal cars squat under plastic sheeting that shudders in wind, ribs bare, the ghost anatomy of motion. A man with a faded cap and a tattoo that has stopped meaning anything waves them to a caravan office with a kettle and no cups. He remembers 1992 in fragments. A buyer who paid cash, wanted taillights, asked for the left, checked the right, frowned at a dimness like a cloud caught behind the lens. The man laughs once at the memory of such caution. Taillights on a dead car and a buyer acting like he was choosing a ring. He hands over the ledger without argument. Bureaucracy has taught him that paper is what keeps the wolves outside the fence. The detectives photograph every page, then every column, then a scribble in the margin that looks like a private note to the future. Bad bulb, no return. Back at the lab, light turns the steel benches into ice. The rucksack strap waits under its dome like a relic, and beside it a new artifact takes the stage, a shard of plastic red as boiled sugar. It was nothing in 1990, one more sparkle in grass that grew past caution tape, but it is something now, the kind of something that machine eyes enjoy. The spectrum analysis hums to itself and then spits out a recipe for red. Polymers, dyes, particulates that match a taillight run used by a small set of models between 1988 and 1991. The database puts its finger on the map like a fortune teller. The white sedan rumor circles to beige, circles to a make that the warehouse man favored because parts were cheap. The chorus grows thicker. You can feel the melody pushing toward a refrain. Across town, in a small flat painted the color of clouds that never rain, an old neighbor girl, no longer a girl, now a woman with a job, a scar behind one ear, a habit of checking locks twice, stares at a scarf folded at the bottom of a drawer. Late peach, the color of a sunset that got lost. She never told anyone she kept it. Found it snagged on the fence 2 days after the lot swallowed the blue rucksack, shook it free with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, ran home and washed the dirt as if evidence were mud that could be rinsed away. She believed she was helping. She believed adults would fix things. Adults did not fix things. 35 years later, the scarf still smells faintly of a detergent the factory stopped making. When the camera said solved, something in her chest cracked like glaze. She phones the tip line and tells a stranger about the drawer. On the other end, the detective's voice drops a half step, the way experienced voices do when they hear a threshold creak. He asks her to bring it in if she can bear to let it go. She says yes before she thinks. She has been letting it go for 3 decades anyway, inch by inch. The interview room learns the patience of water. It has watched men harden and soften, seen eyes skitter and lock, measured the distance between a truth and the mouth that won't speak it. Today it watches the suspect, who has slept badly and shaves badly and breathes like each inhale owes him something. The lawyer is a hinge again, opening and closing sentences like doors. The detective places the transcribed scrapyard ledger on the table without comment. He places a photograph of a taillight with its faint internal bruise. He places a map traced in a thin red line from the suspect's 1993 address back to a yard that stinks of rust and order. The suspect's mouth purses into disbelief, an actor missing his line. He says he doesn't remember 1992. The detective says that's fine, the city does. In the hallway, the tape recorder sits in an evidence locker tagged and barcoded, but ghost sound seeps through. It belongs to a time when men smoked in kitchens and taped over wedding videos, a time of soft focus and hard truths. The retired constable returns with another box because once you open one cupboard in your soul, others rattle. This one holds photographs the department didn't want because they were not of evidentiary value, a category that ages badly. Here is the lot, 1990, 5:30 p.m., a smear of orange sky, 3 boys on BMXs chewing headlines with their eyes. Here is the fence before the chain link upgrade, a drunk geometry of wire and wishful thinking. Here is the corner of the storm channel where the rucksack learned the language of snags. In the bottom of the box, under a calendar from a year no one wants back, lies a receipt from a parts shop near the warehouse, stamped with a date a week after the night the city learned to stop breathing. The name on the receipt is not the suspect's. It is a name no one has written on the board yet, a B-side track with a chorus that could be trouble, a coworker. The coworker's file is dust gray and thin. Ordinary men do not generate much paper unless paper is chasing them. He lived 2 doors down in a row of small houses whose roofs forgot to anchor properly in wind. He left in 1994, not in a hurry, not with fanfare, just a transfer to Worcester, then another to Kimberley, the slow geography of men who shade in new maps by staying almost the same. The task force radiates again, calls again, knocks again. A girl-turned-woman answers a door with a child on her hip and a teething ring shaped like a moon. She says he hasn't been here in years, and she won't pretend she misses him. Another door opens to a man who says the coworker was a joker, which is a word people use when they mean he didn't know when to stop. The third address is a plot with a fence that keeps out goats and guilt. The coworker himself emerges, heavier, hairline thinning, a smile already on, as if he rehearsed politeness at a mirror and decided it looked good on him. He is brought to the station, not as a suspect, not yet, but as a memory officer. He plays the part, talkative, helpful, eager to help solve the tragedy, offering tea he didn't make, lists he doesn't have. He remembers the warehouse clock sticking at 5:45. He remembers the suspect's car with the faulty light because he followed behind once and swore for 10 minutes at the dimness. He remembers a rumor of varsity politics turning ugly because rumors use loudspeakers and facts use whispered prayers. He does not remember the night. His lawyer hasn't arrived because he doesn't know he's going to need one. He says the word innocent like it's a password to a club. It isn't. Evening again, and the city curls back into itself like a fist unclenching by mistakes. The scarf arrives at the lab folded into a plastic bag with a note of apology pinned to it, a shy relic. The fabric is soft in a way modern synthetics aren't. It lifts under the laminar hood like breath. The machines sing their songs. Time tries to excuse itself, but science drags it back by the sleeve. On the weave's edge, under the shadow of a snag where wire bit, there is a tiny dark star the size of a pinhead that isn't rust, isn't dye, isn't dirt. Under fluorescence, it blooms a dull maroon. It remembers iron. Blood speaks even when everyone else forgot the language. The profile they build from that star is not complete. It is not a portrait, not yet, more like a silhouette walking away under a street lamp. But it is not the same silhouette as the one they built from the rucksack strap. It is a second presence. The room tilts. The detective lifts his eyes to the board where who else has been waiting like an empty chair at a family lunch. He writes a second circle beside the first, no name inside, not yet, and he draws a line between them as thin as a held breath. Secondary contributor, the lab writes. Potential accomplice, the board whispers. The city, if it could speak, would say, of course. The co-worker's interview runs long. Politeness tires, jokes thin. He stops trying to be helpful and starts trying to be small. Small men who try to be smaller make noises that rooms notice. He flinches when the photograph of the old fence appears, flinches again when the scarf is mentioned, flinches deepest when a question curves unannounced toward the storm channel. He asks for water too often. Thirst is a refuge for the guilty. When he hears that the machines have found a second trace on the scarf, he does not ask whose. He asks if it's enough. The detective, who has learned to listen for the squeak of a conscience on a polished floor, lets the question sit in the middle of the table like a glass no one wants to pick up. He says the word enough back to the coworker as if testing a bridge plank with a boot heel. It holds. Night folds itself into tight corners. The press keeps watch outside like crows that learned manners. Inside, the retired constable sits on a bench in a hallway that smells like mop water and electricity and stares at his empty hands like they might confess something he missed. The mother of the girl with the blue rucksack breathes in for 4, out for 8, the way a nurse once taught her, and finds that the rhythm holds on nights like this. The suspect lies on a thin mattress and stares at a ceiling where an old leak left a map of some other country. The coworker sits upright in a chair and decides whether to call a lawyer measure by measure as if counting beats. The scarf dries on a line of air beneath a hood, lighter for having told a little of what it knew. There's a sound the city makes when a second name is about to be written on a board. It is not a siren and not a cheer. It's closer to the clack of beads on a string as a hand moves, tallying. It comes from churches and pool halls and kitchens where radios mumble. It comes from the ocean, the way breath comes from a sleeping mouth. It arrives in the station like weather under a door. The detective hears it and pinches the bridge of his nose and thinks of the word ring, not as jewelry, but as a structure. One man in the center, one at the edge, one whistling, one driving, one carrying fear the way men carry planks. He thinks of how many circles a single night can draw and how long it takes to erase even one. When the call comes from a lab tech with a voice that is trying not to run, everyone pretends they weren't waiting. Partial match, the tech says. Not a full chord, but harmony, a resonance with a name in a database that lives far from Cape Town, in a province whose dust tastes different, but whose men once shared pay stubs and jokes with a warehouse crew that bought cheap parts and fixed dim taillights. The name is not the suspect's and not the coworker's. It is the coworker's cousin, a man who drifted in for a season, worked until the union vote got tight, drifted out with a small severance and a new habit of moving before questions formed. He owns a car that was once white, then beige, then gone. He has a scar behind one ear. The arrow on the board thickens. Who else begins to answer itself? Outside, wind combs the mountain's hair, and the city listens to 1990 breathing through the grates again. Not closure, not that sugar word, but a tightening, a turn of the key one notch further. The lot where the tuck shop stands now holds its breath the way soil holds last year's roots, waiting for the shovel. The fence hums a low note in the storm like a throat clearing before testimony. The river in the storm channel talks to itself, an old gossip in a new dress. And you lean closer because the night is speaking a little louder, because the cord is accruing instruments, because the cold that rolled through the door has begun to feel like weather you can name. The city's metronome ticks. The blade of morning warms over the flame again. Somewhere, a sleeping dog twitches at a dream made of whistles and footsteps and the word don't fading into the rain. Tomorrow is coming fast. The drawer is open. The board is hungry. The voices on old tape have started to sound like they want to be recognized. Morning arrives like a verdict no one has read yet. Bruised sky, a line of gulls writing hieroglyphs along the wind. And the board learns a new color of ink for the cousin's name no one has said aloud in years. A map unrolls. The red line that once stopped at the warehouse now lifts and arcs inland, over Swartland-stitched fields, beyond the fossil riverbeds, out to a town whose roofs glitter with dust and resignation. Kimberly first, maybe. Worcester as a halfway memory. The task force splits. One team guards the suspect and keeps pulling at the coworker's thread. Another packs a small suitcase each, shirts that don't wrinkle, notebooks that do, a folder stamped subpoena like a drumbeat, and heads for the road with caffeine and a stubbornness the engine understands. The highway teaches patience. The land flattens and then refuses to, small rises like old knuckles under a blanket, while the mountain in the rear view becomes a painting you take with you because you can't bear to look away. The detectives in the car don't speak much. Silence has learned to be an ally. On the dashboard, a printout flutters with tower pings from 1990 and 1992 and 1994. Timestamps like fossils, their sequence a rhythm if you know how to clap along. One of them taps it idly, not quite in time with the wipers. Another stares out and counts fences. Somewhere on the road, a truck loses a strap and a crate of fruit goes wild. The car sideslips through the debris like a memory dodging a confession, and everything smells suddenly of bruised pears. The driver says nothing. He just tightens his grip and keeps the speed steady. This is the part where stories would like a montage. Real work is longer than music. Back at the station, the coworker learns what distance feels like when it's measured by questions. He tries positions on the chair like shirts, upright, slouched, folded arms, open palms, and none fit for long. The detective across from him plays a different game now, a slow chess that uses the whole board. He mentions the cousin not as an accusation, but as a possibility with edges. He mentions the part's shop receipt like a coin found under a cushion. He mentions a witness who recalls a whistle that was more than one man's wind. He watches the coworker watch him. Somewhere in that watch is fear, and somewhere in that fear is a path. The coworker says he will help if he can. The detective believes him and doesn't. Two things can be true. The tape recorder on the table turns without drama, storing everything in a spool of brown that outlives most promises. Kimberly doesn't blink when police from the coast roll into its grid. The sun sits differently here, closer to your teeth. The cousin's address is a small, neat square, knee-high wall, a plastic chair bleached by afternoons, a washing line that remembers shirts shaped like absence. A dog does the math and decides to bark. A woman with eyes that have had enough answers the door and says the cousin works odd shifts now and then when he can get them. Travels for work, mind you, sometimes to the mines, sometimes not. No, he isn't here. No. She cannot say when he'll be back. Yes. He always was a help with the groceries. No. He never mentioned Cape Town except to say, the wind there stings your teeth. Her voice tries on innocence, like a pair of shoes. It pinches. The detectives thank her because you always do, and one of them steps aside to phone the lab, while the other looks past her shoulder into a room with a couch that sags and a calendar with a car that wants to be a promise. Partial match, not probative on its own, the lab says, into the hum of distance. But the scarf's secondary profile is male, consistent with the cousin's paternal line, and the cousin's application file from an old job puts him in the city on a week that overlaps our map. The detective listens and watches a red kite circle the air above a cul-de-sac where nothing ever happens. He says thank you. He says he'll keep the line warm. He says, without saying, this is the sound the case makes when it starts to lean. They find the cousin 2 days later in Worcester, working cash in hand at a body shop whose sign has peeled to Die Hop, and for once a metaphor doesn't need a nudge. He's under a car when they greet his boots, slides out on a plank with a face like a man who's been woke from a dream that had nicer rules. He sees badges, and his gaze does what gazes do when they have tried for years not to recognize the bill arriving. He smiles, then stops, then looks for an exit that isn't there. He says he'll come down to the station, of course, no problem. He has nothing to hide. And there it is, the old chorus, the city's favorite key, too bright to be true. He is chatty on the drive, as if filling air with anything will keep the heavy words from forming. He remembers vague years and sharper nights. He remembers the suspect as someone who bought cheap beer and told expensive lies and kept a car running on hope and borrowed light. He remembers once driving a white sedan that wasn't white anymore because beige is what neglect does to dreams. He remembers a whistle he always hated, a habit of the coworkers when he wanted to show he'd arrived. He does not remember a lot, especially around August 1990. The detectives nod. They let the road talk. The road says, you can outrun many things. The calendar isn't one of them. Back in Cape Town, the mother sits with a detective who learned how to bring bad and good news in the same hand. He tells her about the cousin. He tells her about the scarf. He tells her about probabilities that aren't prayers but can sometimes answer one. She listens with the stillness of someone who lost the habit of fidgeting 35 winters ago. Her tea grows cold, unoffended. She thanks him without moving her mouth much. She says she does not want to see their faces, but she wants them to know her daughter had one. She shows him a picture the press never printed. Lee not at a picnic and not imposed perfection, but on a couch exactly like this. Hair up, eyes tired from study, socks mismatched, a look that says tomorrow is an exam and also a promise. The detective looks at it longer than he should. He asks if he may take a copy. He doesn't know why, except that truth needs anchors. The lab eats, sleeps, and dreams in numbers now. A newer technique arrives by courier. Deep profiling, the report says, a phrase that sounds like a trench in the sea, and the techs run the rucksack strap again, and the scarf again, and the shard of taillight again. Not because repetition will change facts, but because sometimes facts reveal relatives when you hum them more than once. On a graph that looks like a night city seen from a plane, peaks a line. The strap's dominant profile pounds in time with the suspects. The scarf's second voice hums at a lower, stubborn frequency closer to the cousin's. The machine doesn't know the word accomplice. It only knows familiar. They pull phone records that aren't supposed to exist anymore from a place that pays to remember what people thought they forgot. It's not a smoking gun. It's the heat left in a room after a door shuts. A pager service, a fossil, shows a nudge from the coworker to a number the cousin used briefly while he was between SIM cards the week after. The note's code translates to meat scrap. Men have always used small words when the work is heavy. The detective circles it on a photocopy in a pen that's running dry. The faintness feels appropriate. The interview room becomes a mirror hall. The suspect turns the same answers at new angles. The coworker tries to outrun his own voice, fails, and sits in a tired silence that weighs more than talk. The cousin, freshly scrubbed with a station towel, reads the water stains on the ceiling like a horoscope and decides he is born under the sign of bad luck. His first lawyer is a friend. His second is a man whose tie knows the smell of court. He asks the detective what they have. The detective would like to say, a city that finally learned how to listen. He says instead, enough to keep asking. Outside, the tuck shop owner flicks a switch and the shutter rattles up. He pretends the hair on his arms doesn't rise every time he turns the key. He watches two school kids detour around the patch of concrete that used to be grass like they've been told a story their bodies believed. He thinks of the fence's hum. He thinks of August rain. He thinks of closing early if the news vans come back. He doesn't want to sell airtime to voices that only appear when there's blood in the water. He wants to sell mints and phone cards and the idea that the world is mostly reasonable. He knows that's a lie. He prefers it anyway. Evening again, the third one since Kimberly, and the sky wears the exhausted purple of a bruise after it decides to stop blooming. The task force eats pie with plastic forks standing up because chairs make people think of rest. They share looks more than words. The retired constable returns, of course he does, with a memory instead of a box, a kid on a BMX who used to whistle like a bird, who grew into a man who whistled like a warning, who left the flats for better round about 1991, who once wore a late peach scarf for a joke and got chased for it by friends whose names he's forgotten. He says he doesn't know if it matters. The detective says everything matters until it doesn't. They write the memory on a pink sticky note and slap it on the board near who else. The board has become a quilt made of anger and printer toner. And still, the question that chews timber, what took so long? The lab can answer about technology growing teeth. The detectives can answer about budgets and boxes and the faith of small units in big rooms. The mother can answer about a city learning new languages for pain. But the night itself has an answer too. Things hidden in plain sight are the last to be found because looking becomes a habit that overlooks. The suspect carried groceries. The coworker made jokes. The cousin changed addresses. The lot became a shop. The fence became new. The wind went on speaking and nobody translated. Now a judge's signature slides across paper like a door unlocking on its hinges. Search warrants for a shed behind the cousin's address in Kimberly, for a storage unit rented cash only for 6 months in 1992 under a name that is now a lie, for a box at the back of the parts warehouse marked personal, do not move. The team splinters again, emboldened by paper. In Kimberly, the shed is a museum of intentions, tools hung with care, a coffee tin of bolts, a shelf of manuals, a cardboard box as old as the decade with a layer of dust thick enough to keep secrets quiet. Inside the box, a collection of plates from cars that don't match the cousin's, a taillight lens with a bruise like the one the lab loved, and a scarf fragment, not late peach anymore, but drained to the color of surrender. No one speaks. Someone breathes. Cameras click in respectful staccato. At the storage unit, a narrow intestine of corrugated metal and regret. The air tastes like rubber and old rain. The padlock eats its key and then yields. Inside, a car door wrapped in a blanket, a reel of magnetic tape without a case, a plastic bag with coins newer than 1990 and stubby receipts older, a jacket that belonged to a body the law will have to match to a name. The detectives lay a tarp like they're setting a table. They place each item like cutlery. Every small ritual is a way to say, we see you now. In the warehouse, the box marked personal contains what it always does when men lie, nothing, and then too much. At the bottom, beneath papers that smile innocently, lies a rucksack buckle, the twin of one that sat mute in evidence for decades. It is scratched in a way that suggests a struggle and polished in a way that suggests denial. The detective who finds it closes his eyes once, brief, a human blink in a mechanized day. He writes the time. He takes the photo. He lets a low, prayerless thank you out through his teeth. Night drops fast, like a curtain that's learned all the old tricks, and the city holds still for a count of 3 as if about to sneeze. The headline writers sharpen pencils. The mother sits with the photograph of socks and exams and makes a decision that feels like standing at the edge of a cold sea. She will look at them in court when the time comes. She will not blink. She will teach her lungs a new rhythm. In the interview room, 3 chairs scrape back in 3 different places as 3 different men, suspect, co-worker, cousin, brace for the sound of movement on the other side of doors. The detective runs a hand over the board, static snapping his skin, and feels the word solved nearby, as if behind a wall. Not yet, but near enough that the air knows the taste of it. Near enough that even the fence outside seems to stop humming and listen for the next key turning, the next hinge popping, the next drawer sliding open on a truth that has waited so long it learned patience as a first language. Dawn peels back the sky with cold fingers, and the city blinks into a mirror it's avoided for 35 years. Warrants have a way of rearranging oxygen. Every room the task force enters feels newly ventilated, air moving where it never dared. The cousin's shed is wrapped and sealed. The storage unit is a grid of photographed angles. The warehouse box is tagged with a number that will haunt 3 men's sleep. And still the board hungers. The buckle goes under glass. The scarf fragment is logged like a lost word finally spelled right. The shard of taillight sits beside its twin with the stubborn serenity of proof. You can feel the case harden, resin poured into a mold that once was only outline. The suspect's lawyer files motions before the sun finds its confidence. Suppression, chain of custody, fruit of the poison tree. The phrasing is crisp, the posture aggressive, the intent simple. Muddy the water until the fish forget how to breathe. The prosecutor answers in a tone tempered by years of not blinking. The chain runs unbroken. The fruit fell into our hands because the tree leaned toward it. The fish learned gills long ago. In the corridor, a clerk's shoes click like a metronome counting down to an arraignment the city will watch with its jaw set and its hands tight at the sides. Inside the lab, the buckle becomes a biography. Under magnification, the scratch pattern is a field of crossed blades. One deep gouge aligning with the rucksack's strap weave, one faint curve where metal kissed concrete. A smear at the edge looks like nothing until a reagent coaxes it to speak, blooming into the faint blush of old blood and older rain. On the inner lip, a crescent of polymer the color of boiled sugar, consistent with taillight plastic, nested so small it could be the punctuation at the end of a very large sentence. The analyst prints the image, pins it to a foam board, and writes in tidy letters under it: transfer, contact, sequence. Each word is a rung. Each rung is a way out of a long hole. The coworker sits in interview 2 and tries to outrun quiet. Quiet wins. He has moved from bravado to bargains, from jokes to mathematics. How much will help look like guilt? How much will silence look like complicity? The detective places a photograph on the table, just the shed shelf, tools arranged like syllables in a grammar of work, and taps the spot where the scarf fragment lay. The coworker's throat clicks. You can hear it even over the hum of the light. He says the cousin kept trophies, that the cousin always kept trophies, that he told him once to throw rubbish out, and the cousin said it's not rubbish if it remembers. The detective does not smile. He writes remembers in his notebook and underlines it twice. A call comes in from Worcester, a mechanic whose hands are black-rimmed and clean-eyed. He remembers the cousin arguing about a taillight years ago, insisting dimness wasn't the bulb, it was the lens, swearing you had to polish from the inside. He remembered because the cousin's voice went high on inside the way men's voices go high when they lie about not being afraid. He replaced a bulb anyway. He remembered a beige sedan pulling away into a rain that tasted like metal. He doesn't know if it helps. He tells them because the city feels like a room where you finally admit the smell is gas. The suspect's arraignment is a choreography learned by heart. Cuffs off, cuffs on, a murmured name that sounds too small for its new weight, a charge read in a register that dignifies no one. Cameras kiss glass as if tenderness could penetrate architecture. The mother arrives with her spine like a metronome. She stands because standing is the only way to remind bones what they're for. The suspect looks for faces he can borrow courage from and finds only windows. When the clerk says, "How do you plead?" the syllables hang in the room like a rope bridge over a ravine. "Not guilty," he says. And the bridge doesn't break, but it sways. The city watches it swing and decides not to look away. Back in the room with the glass wall, the cousin meets the buckle. He tries not to recognize it, fails, and rearranges his face into the mask men wear when the party's lights come up. He asks for a cigarette he won't be given. He asks for water he won't drink. He asks what the penalty is for accessory before the fact, after the fact, during, all the tenses no grammar book prepared him for. The detective doesn't answer with statutes, he answers with a map. He draws August 1990's path with a pen that has enough ink to reach 2025. Bus, barber, shop, lot, fence, channel. He sets the buckle at the lot. He sets the shard at the lot. He sets the scarf fragment at the fence. He sets the taillight bruise at the road. He taps each one, tick, 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 until the cousin hears a clock he cannot sleep through. The cousin's breath shortens. He starts to talk like a man who believes there might be a door if he names it correctly. He says the whistle wasn't his. He says he was told to drive. He says he didn't see her face. He says he didn't know it would go like that. He says we, then swallows the plural and coughs up he, then returns to we as if pronouns are a tide with its own mind. He says they argued about the light because getting stopped would be stupid. He says the lot was supposed to be quick. He says the word quick like he wants it to absolve, like speed could make harm brief rather than bright. He says he kept the scarf piece by accident, then admits nothing is an accident that survives 3 moves. He says he can show where the car door came from. He says he can point to the place near the storm channel where the rucksack caught because he can still see it when he closes his eyes. He says the coworker whistled to warn of footsteps, and the whistle sounded like a bird that had learned to hate the sky. The coworker hears the cousin has started to speak, and his courage shrinks 2 sizes. He moves his chair away from the mirrored glass, as if distance works on truths, like it does on heat. When the detective returns, the coworker spills the same nouns in a new order: car, lot, light, whistle, channel. He insists he stayed by the road. He insists he thought it was a prank that turned into a mistake, that turned into a problem, that turned into a silence. He insists the suspect told him it was politics, that the girl had said something in class, that it was a scare, that no one meant an end. The detective listens and hears the old city alibi, a fog of ideology over a crime of appetite. He writes scare and draws a line to harm. The line is straight. The words do not save themselves. An archivist in a municipal basement becomes a midwife to consequence. She locates an old storm drain work order from September 1990. Blockage near Lansdowne, removal of debris. Items transferred to Department Storage B17. Department Storage has never thrown anything away. It has merely relocated responsibility under layers of dust. In B17, behind traffic cones that remember other days, sits a plastic crate with a faded stencil. AUG 90, channel clear. Inside, the past has kept itself tidy. A jumble of silt-hardened trash, a shoe without a partner, a bent hair clip, 2 broken bottles, and a rectangle of vinyl with a zipper tooth welded in place by time. The zipper tooth matches the rucksack's geometry like a grin finally learning how to be something else. The vinyl carries a whisper of the same fibers found on the suspect's jacket: old wool, moth-bitten, specific as a fingerprint when the spectrum sees it right. The archivist watches the detective's eyes as he lifts the rectangle with tweezers. She recognizes the look. It's the look people make when a ghost nods. The retired constable walks the flats at dusk and lets his feet do what compasses do when you forget to hold them level. He finds the BMX boy's old corner by accident and stares at a wall that has been repainted 10 times and still remembers every scribble. A man his age stops beside him and says, without hello, that the whistles stopped after winter 90, and the boys who learned them stopped too. 1 to Worcester, 1 to a mine, 1 to court for something else. He doesn't say names. He doesn't need to. The constable thanks him by looking him in the eye. In neighborhoods like this, a direct look is a promise not to waste it. The mother's living room becomes a chapel without altar. Photographs line the edge of a table like congregants waiting for a benediction they no longer expect. The detective sits where grief has worn the couch to a memory of weight and tells her what they have, not to celebrate, not to wound, but to make the air honest. He tells her that men have begun to say we. He tells her about the fence and the scarf and the buckle and the storm drain crate that waited 35 years like a saved seat. He says the word accomplice and watches it bruise the air and sink. She nods once, then once more. She asks about rain. He says it was raining. She closes her eyes as though checking an old calculation and says, yes. Then very softly she asks if anyone said her daughter's name that night. The detective answers with his jaw clenched and his voice a half note lower. Someone said, don't. She nods again as if that is an answer the world could afford. In court, the prosecutor begins to stack the rungs in public. The buckle's photograph on an easel, the tail light bruise under a lens, the scarf fragment's spectrum graph like a skyline, the storage unit's inventory laid out like a chessboard mid-game, the pager code translated to the dumb clarity of meat scrap. Defense objects, the judge sustains and overrules, a metronome of authority. The suspect watches his past take the stand in objects. The coworker watches his jokes turn into exhibits. The cousin watches the door as if it might vote to acquit. The mother watches the mountain of small truths rise, not to bury but to mark. Outside, the tuck shop owner decides to keep the lights on late. He sells a packet of mints to a boy who stares at the concrete the way boys stare at haunted fields. He hands over the change with the ordinary grace of hands that have passed money and news and comfort across a counter for years. He tells the boy nothing except, be careful walking, and both of them hear the old echo in the new advice. The fence hums when the wind shifts. The shop's neon sign buzzes a blue that makes the night seem nearer. The interview room changes temperature when a confession tries the door. It never opens with a flourish. It opens like rusted hinges, resistance, a complaint, a give. The cousin starts first, in fragments. A whistle, a shove, a hand over a mouth, a strap that bit. A panic that felt like electricity, a run, a car door not closing, a light that wouldn't brighten no matter how he begged it to, a road that did not end, a silence that did. The coworker follows with edits, with excuses, with reductions that fool no one. The suspect sits longest. Inside is quiet like a safe he forgot the combination to, until the buckle photograph is placed in front of him and the room becomes a tunnel and the tunnel becomes a night and the night becomes August and he says, "I didn't mean to," like a man trying to bargain with physics. The lab will count alleles tomorrow, and the court will calendar hearings, and the city will find a fresh reserve of outrage as if the body grows organs to metabolize this particular poison. But tonight belongs to a simpler geometry, a circle closing. Not the circle you draw for closure, that's a word better suited to drawers than to people, but the circle detectives trace when they start at a bus stop and end at a courtroom and know the path between contains all the ways a city can fail and then try, fail, and then try, until trying itself becomes a kind of fragile victory. Near midnight, the retired constable stands by the storm channel and listens for the dog that isn't there. The wind says nothing worth repeating. The water talks to itself like an old man telling a joke he refuses to explain. The fence no longer hums, it waits. The constable takes off his hat. He says a name to the dark because names belong in air, not only in files. In homes up and down the flats, windows darken, then glow, then darken again, houses blinking in and out of rest. The mountain is a silhouette of vigilance. The ocean works at the shore with the patience of grief, and you, listening, can feel the hinge again, metal warming, pins aligning, a door that has been forced by years finally ready to swing, slowly, inexorably, toward a room that is not colder but clearer. Tomorrow will bring the arithmetic of charges and the prose of motions and the politics of trials. Tonight is the sound of a city remembering how to say, "We heard you, we hear you still." Morning takes its time and then arrives all at once like a witness finally entering the room. The city wears a crispness that makes edges more honest. Curbstones cut sharper, shadows admit their borders. The mountain sits like a verdict the light can't argue with. Inside the station, the case stretches its limbs, every box reopened, every photo reglimpsed, every arrow on the board thickened where memory and proof have kissed. The buckle is no longer a relic, it is a hinge. The scarf fragment isn't sorrow, it's a root. The shard of taillight is a red thread threaded through three men's pockets, and the knot is starting to bite. Legal mourning is different from detective mourning. It comes in suits that carry the smell of paper. A prosecutor reviews affidavits with fingers that learned confidence the hard way, lips moving in a whisper that is not prayer but feels adjacent. She circles verbs, underlines timestamps, rehearses the order in which to stack facts so that the weight of one fact increases the weight of the next like bricks arranged with gravity in mind. Across the hall, a defense team subdivides doubt into palatable portions. Contamination, mishandled crate, unreliable recollection, the soft radio hiss of too late to be reliable swelling under all their sentences. Outside, the press tightens laces you can't see and chooses camera angles that make the building look taller than regret. The suspect has slept a kind of sleep that does nothing, forgiven by no dream, punished by none, eyes waiting for morning like a clock too honest to lie. The co-worker's nap is a patchwork of jerks and starts. In one, he is back on a BMX. In another, the whistle is someone else's mouth, but his lungs. In a third, he is running with the weight of a single word he cannot drop, we. The cousin has not slept at all. He counts the holes in the ceiling tiles because counting gives the mind a false task. He cannot decide if he is a witness or a man already on the wrong side of the sentence. The room's geometry does not care. A courier thumps a box onto the lab bench like news set down too loudly. Inside, the storm drain crate's bounty, now eased from silt's grip, coaxed into clarity. The techs move with the reverence of people who've learned that ceremony keeps hands steady. They tease fibers, they encourage residues, they invite metal shavings to explain themselves. One shaving, the size of a fleck of pepper, tells a story only magnets understand. It comes from a bolt common to a certain model's door assembly. The car door wrapped in a blanket in the storage unit is measured, mapped, matched. The blanket's lint carries a few ancient dog hairs that are not from the suspect's home, not the coworkers, but consistent with the breed, once tied in the yard behind the cousin's address in Worcester, a dog whose photograph appears in the background of a family braai. Tongue out, tail a blur, life robust, the kind of detail that proves the universe likes to keep receipts. On the board, the word ring becomes network because rings suggest perfection and unity, and none of these men share those virtues. They are sloppier than that. They overlap rather than complete. Arrows multiply, not like accusation, but like gardeners staking a plant that has decided to climb. The warehouse shifts from backdrop to actor. Its clock that sticks at 5:45 becomes a joke too pointed to ignore. Its sign-in sheets reveal that the suspect and the co-worker were on lunch at 17:30 on a day when no one took lunch at 17:30. A petty falsity, bright as a match in dry grass. A supervisor's note from the archive, "Boys left early, wind," is dated August 1990 and underlined twice. The kind of banal emphasis that obliviously records a pivot in a city's history. Interview, again. The room has learned their breaths by now. The detective drops the temperature by removing warmth from his voice, not by adjusting a dial. He lays out the blanket fibers, the bolt shaving, the lint story dog hairs. He names the hour the pager chirped. He says the words meet, scrap like a line from a play the room has been rehearsing toward. The cousin's face does something complicated, shame mixed with envy that someone else wrote the cleanest sentences of the story. And then he looks at the mirrored glass as if forgiveness might stand behind it, a silent audience with a stamp in hand. The co-worker, in his own square, hears the pitch in the detective's tone and knows a door is swinging, just not toward him. A new witness arrives at the counter with the careful gait of someone balancing their courage in both hands. He is white-haired now, but his mouth remembers the whistle shape. He was a boy in 1990 who copied men without thinking and stopped copying when one winter became a wall. He doesn't know if this is the whistle everyone means. He demonstrates, lips pursed, the sound cutting clean, sharp, bird-like. A detective in the lobby freezes. This is the timbre he didn't know he was waiting for. The witness says the co-worker taught it to him behind the barber. The summer before said it meant I'm here, said it meant move, said it meant don't look. He says he grew to hate that sound. He says he cannot endure birds at dawn anymore, 35 years later, because their joy feels like an accusation. He signs a statement with shaky pride. The pen blotches, and he jokes about it, and the humor lands, small and human and necessary. Court schedules become scaffolding. Preliminary hearings are placed like trestles. Dates are announced that make the city's calendar twitch. The prosecutor tells the mother gently that there will be delays. She will despise, and delays she will welcome, because both kinds are part of a dance designed to keep outcomes sturdy. The mother says she has learned more patience than any judge has time to admire. She sits by her window and watches a bus ease to a stop and counts the breaths it takes to start again. She cannot help it. Counting, too, becomes a religion. A journalist finds the old barber, or rather the barber finds the journalist because dignity resents cameras but respects being asked. He has a photograph behind his counter, sun-faded, of boys who used to drape themselves on the stoop and whistle at jokes that weren't funny. The co-worker is there, thinner, mouth shaped around his favorite note. A corner of the white sedan peeks into the frame like a nervous understudy. The barber says he hates that the car is in his picture, but admits that pictures tell the truth better than people sometimes. He hands the journalist a copy and says, "Tell them I tried." The journalist will write it, and the line will sound like a cliché to people who weren't here and like a gospel to the ones who were. Lab again, a breakthrough disguised as routine. A new algorithm, lab wonky but courtroom ready, denotes activity level on the strap stain. The transfer pattern suggests pressure and struggle rather than incidental contact, scientific ways to say the strap didn't brush a passerby. It bit, it was gripped, it fought. The prosecutor smiles with only her eyes. The defense team recalibrates its appetite for trial versus bargain. The suspect's lawyer recommends a new posture to his client, contrition without confession, cooperation without collapse. The suspect takes the advice and wears it like a suit that almost fits, except for the seams at the shoulders when certain names are spoken. Outside, the tuck shop owner stacks cool drinks and decides not to answer when a presenter he recognizes asks if he'd like to go on air. He has been on air long enough as it is. The neighborhood has been on air for 35 years. He sells a voucher to a woman who whispers thanks like an apology, and he tells her not to apologize, it's only airtime. The word tastes bitter today. He watches kids walk in 2s and 3s, bodies unconsciously adjusting to the old map of what used to be dangerous. He sees the tiny ritual they perform when crossing the patch of concrete, the half-step detour. and feels both relief and rage that habits can carry grief that long. A call from a mine payroll office adds a plank to the bridge. The cousin clocked out early the week after the disappearance and took an unpaid day, signed a form no one looked at twice because men sometimes just disappear for a day when money is thin. He took a train whose schedule matches a tower ping that brushes the edge of Cape Town's south like a moth's wing. The detective pins the payroll stub to the board between the pager code and the warehouse note. The line they form is not straight, not perfect, but it points a finger your gut understands. Interview again, and the air in the room has the flavor of inevitability. The cousin starts offering nouns before he's asked for sentences. Lot, fence, strap, light, channel. The detective doesn't rescue him with verbs. Men have to choose theirs. He picks grabbed, then grimaces and swaps it for pulled, then stops and lets held curl in his mouth like he's tasted metal. He says the coworker whistled twice and then shut up when a dog barked, and then everyone stopped moving because silence can be louder than guilt. He says the suspect said quick, and then said something about politics. And the word politics hangs in the room like smoke from a cheap candle. Acrid, unconvincing, residue heavy. He says he drove. He says he was told to, as if direction shrinks culpability. He says, I can show you. And in those 4 words, the room hears the sound of a ground that may finally give up its last secret. They take him, shackled by procedure, to the lot that isn't a lot anymore. The tuck shop owner stands back in his doorway, arms crossed, dignity like a jacket. The cousin points, not a flourish, not a performance, just a hand learning to tell the truth. At a corner where the paving seam darkens in a hairline crack, he says the rucksack snagged there, that he remembers the zipper tooth catching, that he yanked and the sound was too loud in the rain. He says the light was dim and the taillight was dimmer and everything felt underwater. A tech kneels with a lamp and examines the seam the way a doctor looks at a scar and nods once. Dust is dust, but dust records motion like a diary without words. The cousin turns toward the storm channel and points again, and the detectives feel the city incline, attentive, as if the mountain itself leaned a centimeter forward. The retired constable stands by the fence without crossing and takes off his hat again, because some gestures make more sense than any speech. He watches the cousin point out the old geometry like a tour guide to a museum of harm. He looks at the mother, who has come and chosen not to come closer, who stands at the edge of the scene like a continent refusing invasion. She holds her own elbows, and the wind reaches for her coat and thinks better of it. The constable thinks, not for the first time, that language is a poor substitute for standing where something happened and letting your bones figure out their own translation. Court again, a flurry of filings, and then the thick, slow ice of calendar. The prosecutor meets the defense under the neutral lights of a hallway the color of compromise. They speak in numbers now, years, ranges, floors below maximums. The coworker's lawyer is the first to break, to dangle cooperation as currency, to suggest a proffer that will make him a lesser planet circling a larger gravity well. The cousin's lawyer follows because trajectories are contagious. The suspect's lawyer says the word trial like a threat and like a hope in the same breath. The prosecutor, who has seen both, does not blink. She says the word prove with a steadiness that rearranges the molecules in the space between them. Night hums in the city's wiring. The mountain is a patient black. The ocean gnaws the same syllable into the shore over and over, Time's favorite mantra. In living rooms, televisions say developments, and sources say, and new evidence. And in kitchens, kettles boil, and cups are warmed, and chairs are pulled out and pushed in, and families who remember August 1990 without a calendar sit and make sure their breathing matches. The mother presses her palm flat to the table's wood grain and feels the way wood remembers pressure, how it keeps a ghost of weight even when the hand lifts. She thinks of the strap. She thinks of buckles. She thinks of the word solved and decides it is not a finish line but the name of a door. She is ready to walk through. She suspects the air on the other side will taste the same. That's fine. Truth, like this wind, doesn't change for your comfort. In the station, the board is no longer a mosaic but a landscape, ridges, roots, a river of red arrows running toward a black square labeled court. No one takes a picture of it. Some maps are for travelers only. The detective stands alone for a minute and lets the quiet sit on his shoulders like a coat he earned. He thinks about the boy's whistle. He thinks about the cousin's hand pointing. He thinks about a zipper tooth trapped in silt for 35 winters, biding its time until the city learned its alphabet. He reaches up and writes a single word beside who else, not a name, not yet, but the promise of zero, none. He puts a question mark after it because humility is part of the oath. He caps the pen. He leaves the room dark. The city outside keeps humming. Cold air, distant sea, neon buzzing at the tuck shop, a dog exhaling in sleep somewhere, and the faintest echo of a voice in a vacant lot that isn't vacant anymore, saying the oldest commandment this case has taught: don't stop. Morning shoulders through cloud like a bailiff through a crowded corridor, and the city files in behind it, early buses inhaling patients, shop shutters stuttering awake, the mountain a black letter heading you cannot appeal. Inside the station, the case has learned to breathe on its own. It sprawls across tables and screens, a living topography of arrows and fibers and receipts, and everyone who steps into the room adjusts their posture like they've walked onto a ship mid-crossing. The buckle glints under glass as if it remembers daylight differently. The scarf fragment, now photographed from every angle, seems less like fabric and more like a small map to a night most people would rather fold away. You can feel the grammar of the story tightening, fewer adjectives, more verbs. Did, went, held, drove, fled, hid, denied, spoke. Court days are a choreography of thresholds. Security gates swallow keys. Elevators become confessionals where no one talks. The hallway hum is an orchestra tuning to anxiety's pitch. Jury selection begins under lights that turn everyone the same shade of uncertain. The prosecutor's voice is a measured instrument. She asks about headlines without saying headline, about memory without saying 1990, about science without saying salvation. The defense asks about doubt with the zeal of a preacher who knows doubt keeps pews warm. Prospective jurors name their ghosts one by one: an uncle who worked at a warehouse, a cousin who went missing, a father who hated the wind on the flats because it sounded like it had learned to speak. The judge listens like a mountain listens, still, but you feel the weight. Back at the lab, activity level analysis grows a second branch. The strap stains pattern, pressure sweeping toward a metal edge, plays nice with physics and ugly with innocence. A second report arrives on the bolt shavings, micro-corrosion consistent with salt air exposure in August conditions. A petty, precise fact that nudges the car door from the storage unit closer to the storm channel by the lot. The texts speak in the clipped sentences of people who have earned the right to love detail. They hand the detective a digest. Sequence aligns: strap, buckle contact, buckle, taillight contact, buckle and strap, fence, fence, scarf snag, car door, storm channel aerosol environment. It reads like poetry written by a tide chart. The detective copies one phrase into his notebook anyway, not for court, for himself. The past leaves pressure. The coworker sits with a fresh lawyer and a fresh vocabulary. He says cooperation like a key he found under a mat. He says context as if it will repaint a wall. He offers a proffer session, talk without handcuffs getting tighter if the words pass inspection. He describes the lot as choreography gone wrong, the suspect a step ahead, the cousin 2 beats behind, himself out by the road, whistling a warning he now pretends was a prayer. He minimizes, as men do when sentences show their teeth. The prosecutor says nothing, just slides a photograph of the fence toward him and sets a pen beside it. The pen rolls a centimeter and stops. The coworker traces the snag in the photo with his eyes like a man identifying his own handwriting. When he speaks, the word "we" finally arrives at full volume. The room, accustomed to echoes, drinks it whole. The suspect has learned the posture of marble, stillness with the suggestion of a story carved underneath. In the interview, that is not an interview, informal, voluntary, a conversation in a corridor where acoustics are oddly kind. He tells the detective that the buckle proves nothing about intent, that accidental contact is the city's most common language, that men brush against fate every day and are not indicted for manners. He says, "I didn't mean again." The sentence unfinished as ever, a bridge to nowhere. The detective listens and lets silence sand the edges off lies. He says Lee's name a third time in as many days without raising his voice. The suspect's jaw tightens as if clenching could hold back chronology. The retired constable returns with a memory that feels like it's been waiting for permission. It's small, as the useful ones often are. A traffic officer who wrote warnings for dim lights in that winter, who got teased for caring about bulbs when the world was on fire. He retired to a caravan park out past Strandfontein, a man who believes in neat lawns and loud radios at acceptable hours. They find him trimming an edge that doesn't need trimming. He remembers the white sedan with the lazy glow, and the driver with the quick gratitude, the kind of thanks that tries to keep you from looking too closely. He didn't write the warning that day because the rain convinced him to wave the car onto safety. He regretted it half an hour later and wrote up the plate number for his own conscience. He kept the notebook when he shouldn't have. It's in his shed, beneath a tackle box and a jar of screws that will never find their holes. The page is water-warped but legible enough to be human. Plate fragment, street name, time, a small infinity recorded in pencil. He hands it over like an apology to physics. The detective treats it like a saint's bone. The tuck shop owner watches the vans come back. He recognizes some faces by their expensive raincoats and learned empathy. He denies requests like a bouncer at a nightclub called Dignity. But he agrees to speak to a grade 11 girl with a school newspaper lanyard and a face like someone who doesn't yet know how to futz the truth with angles. He tells her about the detour stepchildren take around the paving seam, about how rituals are just memory rehearsed until muscles agree. He tells her the shop is a lighthouse and a rumor mill and a church where the sacrament is airtime. He tells her he is tired, which isn't a complaint so much as a measurement. She writes it down with the reverence of someone discovering that ink can be a kind of witness. When she leaves, he slips her a mint for free and says, "Don't print the brand." She laughs, and the laugh sounds like the city wishes more things sounded. Defense strategy pivot, contamination. They choreograph it as if taping off a scene. Glove changes in 1990, aughts, teens, storage conditions, storm drain crate provenance, the retired constable's garage, a nest of confounders. They wave chain of custody like a flag and hope it looks torn. The prosecutor counters, not with a single grand gesture, but with the insistence of sequence. She erects a scaffolding of timestamps and environmental reports and lab logs and testimonies that survive cross-examination because they were built, not hoped. In a pre-trial hearing, she walks the judge through the strap's journey like a docent who can make you feel the texture of glass with her voice. The judge, who has seen showmanship break on the rocks of fact, watches the rivulets of detail carve a canyon. "Admissible," he says, and the word sounds like a door bolt thudding into place. A surprise arrives dressed as paperwork. An insurance claim from 1992, dredged up by an actuary with a grudge against clutter, shows the suspect filed for damage to a rear light after minor collision in rain, paid out under a policy that uses adjectives like aspirin. The date nests in the week after August 1990. The adjuster's photographs, blurry but faithful, catch the bruise inside the taillight's lens, a shadow like someone breathed against red glass and left a thought there. The photograph's corners are cracked, the image is not. The detective stares at it as if it might suddenly remember sound. Jury impaneled, 12 chairs become a continent. Faces that will learn the taste of this story sit and try on neutrality as if it's off the rack and not bespoke. Opening statements arrive like weather fronts. The prosecutor paints in thin layers, letting images accumulate. A bus sighing, a strap biting, a fence singing one note in wind, a shard of red like a drop that refuses to fall. The defense paints in fog, then tries to sculpt doubt out of it. When the prosecutor says Lee's name, no one coughs. The silence is full without being heavy, a small miracle in a room built to be loud. Witnesses. The lab's lead explains touch DNA the way a patient teacher explains that gravity isn't a suggestion. The defense tries to make partial profiles sound like coin flip. The tech smiles with only half her face and says numbers without apology. The retired constable tells the story of a cassette that hissed longer than most careers, and when he says he kept the box because he couldn't bear to burn history, the courtroom does a small, indecorous thing. It believes him. The boy-turned-man demonstrates the whistle. It knifes the room like a slender blade. One juror flinches with the memory of birds. The judge glances over his glasses as if to ask the air itself to behave. The mother sits as if every chair in the world were this chair. She watches strategic pauses and evidentiary objections, and the way law wraps harm in language until harm looks almost presentable. When the photograph of socks and exams is entered not as evidence but as context, a human perimeter for a forensic core, the judge allows it, briefly, limited purpose, and the image appears for 6 seconds before vanishing like a sun through fast cloud. 6 seconds are enough to alter barometric pressure. The cousin takes the stand under the terms of a deal tight as a drum. He is not a sympathetic man. The point is not sympathy. He keeps his eyes on the prosecutor's collarbone like he's reading instructions printed there. He uses verbs now, perhaps for the first time since that winter. I drove. He whistled. He grabbed. She said, "Don't." The courtroom inhales and does not fully exhale for a count of 5. The defense tries to shear pieces off his credibility, and credibility sheds, but the core resists. There is a weight to specificity that even cross-examination learns to lift with its legs. The coworker follows with a testimony that tries to be a parachute and opens like a shopping bag. He minimizes, then corrects, then remembers that deals have clauses, and you can hear the paper rustle each time he approaches one. He admits to the pager message. He admits the whistle was his language, taught to boys who didn't deserve to inherit it. He admits he believed politics, until the second he didn't. The prosecutor doesn't press the morality. She harvests the geography. Where, when, who, how fast, which hand. The jurors write without looking down. Outside, the city monitors itself the way a patient learns to watch a wound. The tuck shop's neon hum is a pitch someone starts to miss when it's off. Electricity, too, becomes a ritual. Children still detour the seam. The fence's new rigidity is less musical than its predecessor, but wind still plucks it, and it still answers. A dog barks 2 streets over, and a retired constable, walking without admitting it's on purpose, stops and waits to hear if the bark will cut off. It doesn't. He tips his hat at no one, absurd and right, cross currents. A defense expert suggests secondary transfer, ghost DNA, skin cells traveling like rumors. The lab rebuts with activity interpretation, with track and trace logic, with the happy tyranny of sequence. A storm drain worker from 1990, found 3 suburbs inland, hands shaking only a little, recalls the vinyl like a snakeskin he lifted into the crate, the way the zipper tooth looked like a small, dirty gem. He remembers because he nearly cut his finger on it, and swore and swears again, softly in the witness box. A profanity mild and sincere enough to make 2 jurors smile for the first time all week. Night leans in. Court adjourns with a stamp that echoes like a car door closing in rain. The suspect is let out with a face that has learned to hide ideas. He glances at the mother because looking away takes more courage than he has left. She doesn't give him the mercy of not seeing her. She sees him and lets the seeing be part of the record no stenographer will capture. The cousin returns to a holding cell that smells like bleach and determinism. The co-worker stares at his hands as if they might confess independent of his mouth. In the station's quiet, the board now has fewer question marks. Who else keeps its question mark out of principle? The detective stands before it and lets the hum of vending machines and fluorescent light buzz compose a small anthem. He thinks of the man with the notebook who regretted a warning he didn't write. He thinks of a zipper tooth that refused to dissolve. He thinks of a whistle that turned into evidence. He thinks of a mother's 6 seconds of context. He writes one last arrow from strap to buckle, to fence, to scarf, to door, to taillight, to lot, to court, and underlines the line once, not for drama, but to say, "This is the road." Then a ripple in the calm, a call from property about an unclaimed envelope in the 1990 box, stuck to the underside of a divider, slit by time's careless hands, contents unlogged. Inside, a bus ticket stub, almost nothing, almost trash, stamped with a March exam date, ink run, but legible enough to Mary Lee's planner note for civics review, an object that says she rode this route more than once. That routine was her ally until it wasn't. The detective doesn't know why tears find their stupid way when nothing new has been proven. Maybe because proof is not the only currency. Maybe because routine deserved a better memorial than absence. He carries the stub to the mother's door himself, a small pilgrimage. He holds it out like an apology and a relic. She takes it between forefinger and thumb the way one picks up a petal. She doesn't cry either. She asks, in a voice that has learned the secret of dry weather, if she may keep it. He says yes, like a vow. On his way back to the car, he looks up and the mountain is doing what mountains do, standing without explanation, making patience look like an art form. He starts the engine. He doesn't turn on the radio. He lets the city be the only thing that speaks. Tomorrow will be expert reports and chains of custody and the ancient dance of objection and admission. But tonight, the wind off the Atlantic files the edges off the day, and the street learns to exhale in long, slow drafts. The tuck shop light snaps off, and the dark reclaims its shapes. Somewhere, a boy who never learned the whistle sleeps like stone. Somewhere, a juror sits at a kitchen table with a glass of water and reads the instruction sheet again, like liturgy. Somewhere, the fence stands in silhouette and looks almost like a staff with a measure waiting for notes. And in that measure, in that pause before the next bar, a city that has been listening for 35 years hears its own breathing steadier than yesterday, not because closure has arrived with stagecraft, but because truth has learned the route and is taking it one careful, relentless step at a time. Morning files its paperwork across the sky in triplicate, blue, then glare, then the gray line that means wind will argue later. The courthouse breathes in the way large buildings do when they're about to hold people's names in their mouth. Inside, the hallway smells like toner and coffee and the faint ozone of conviction waiting for an outlet. The case is a machine now, and the machine is awake. The buckle, the strap, the shard, the scarf, the door, the tail light, the pager, the crate, the whistle, each piece a cog whose teeth have finally found the next. You can hear that steady meshing in the way voices drop and shoes soften, and even the elevators pause an extra heartbeat before they open, as if getting their timing right is homage. Jury takes their seats the way birds land on a wire, each with a private calculation together with a single humming purpose. The prosecutor stands with a stack of quiet papers and the calm of someone who has learned that drama wastes calories. She begins where the city can follow with its eyes closed: bus, barber, shop, lot. She lets verbs do the heavy lifting. She resists adjectives like sugar. The defense counters with a case that wants to be smoke, secondary transfer, chain gaps, the human problem of memory, the bureaucratic problem of storage. And the judge lets both weathers pass through, one gust at a time, because that is how rooms like this prevent hurricanes later. Witnesses again, the kind that talk in angles and time. An electrical engineer testifies about taillight optics, how a lens bruise can cut a beam's heart by 10, 15%, how rain makes dimness act like distance. He speaks in numbers that land like pebbles hitting water, small circles widening until they touch the shore of meaning. A dimmer light buys longer shadow. The defense asks if a dim taillight ever killed anyone. He says the law cares about risk, not philosophy. The jury writes that down with faces that do not move. A storm drain worker from the archive returns with a second memory unearthed by hearing himself in court the first time. The day they cleared B-17, a supervisor's note: keep crate labeled AUG 90, channel clear. Possible evidence? Tucked under a rubber band, it's stamped with a date 2 weeks after the lot went quiet. Procedure was trying to be born, even then, even in chaos. The prosecutor holds the note like a photograph of a baby that grew into a department. The defense calls it hearsay dressed as stationery. The judge calls it context riding shotgun with chain of custody. The note is admitted. It sits on an easel with the modest pride of paperwork that did its job. The cousin returns, hair flattened, shirt better than yesterday's, deal sitting at his elbow like a supervisor. He speaks softer because soft lands farther in rooms like this. I drove. He whistled. We argued about the light. He said, quick. She said, don't. The air goes narrow and bright, a tunnel everyone has to walk through. The defense tries to plant weeds, benefit, bias, bargain, but the soil is packed with facts now, and the weeds do not take. The co-worker follows, contrition bleeding at the edges, his narrative like a patched tire that still turns. He gives up the pager code without needing the translation. He gives up the warehouse lunch at 17:30 that was not a lunch. He gives up the word politics with the shame of a man who used a large word to cover a small courage. The suspect remains a study in refusal. On cross, he says his name like it owes him. He says the strap could have brushed him on a taxi months before. He says the buckle could have scraped any concrete. He says the city is a place where coincidence walks around in daylight unafraid. He does not look at the mother, not once. The prosecutor does not ask him why. She asks him where. The map tightens. Here? No. Here? No. Here? I don't remember. Memory is a door that he opens only enough to slide excuses through. The jury watches hinge work like carpenters. Outside, the tuck shop runs its quiet ministry. People buy mints and say nothing and say everything in the way they count out coins, the way their hands shake or don't. The owner nods at regulars and ignores the camera that pretends to be a customer. In the afternoon lull, he leans on the counter and catches his own reflection in the plexi. A man who kept a light on for a long time without demanding applause. He thinks of the seam in the paving and wonders if one day children will walk straight instead of making that small, reverent bend. He isn't sure whether he wants them to. Midday, a fracture line appears, but in the good way, like frost cracking a pipe that needed replacing. An actuarial clerk from the insurer produces a microfiche image of the 1992 taillight claim, the same bruise inside the lens, the same angle. The defense objects to the romance of archaeology. The judge says romance isn't evidence, but this is. The image fills the screen for a breath longer than it needs to. It looks like a crimson pupil clouded by time. In a city where eyes have watched too much, the metaphor is almost indecent. The jury keeps their eyes soft anyway. Professionalism is a kind of mercy. Afternoon is for experts the defense chose. One speaks about ghost DNA, skin cells traveling like gossip and landing like lies. He is smooth, immaculate, expensive. The lab's lead returns to say transfer has a grammar too, that the strap stains spoken pressure and direction, not drift, that fences do not snag ghost cloth, that a buckle does not grow red plastic crescents from rumor. The courtroom is a mouth-learning syntax it should have been taught in 1990. You can feel comprehension settle like dust in a beam of light, visible only because light insists on it. A juror coughs during a pause, and the sound startles because no one remembers what unimportant noises are. The judge recesses for 10, and the hallway fills with relief staged as movement. The retired constable stands by a window and watches the wind sort the trees and thinks how many days can be measured in dog barks. The day the bark cut off. The day a different bark did not. He wonders what justice sounds like when it arrives. He decides it isn't a sound. It's a temperature. Back in session, the prosecutor calls the municipal archivist, the midwife of B-17. She speaks about labels, about rubber bands, about the old places where cities put guilt when they were too busy to carry it. Her hands are the kind that stack, sort, respect. She is the opposite of dramatic, which is why she compels. The defense tries to turn her into a filing cabinet with opinions. She refuses the promotion with a smile. I keep what comes, she says. I don't decide what it is. The jury writes that line. The judge doesn't, but he could. Late light, forgiving and violent in equal measure, slants across the floor when the mother is called, not to establish anything a graph could, but to establish what graphs can't, that a person was there. The prosecutor is careful. No grief theater, no strings on the orchestra. She asks about the bus route. She asks about civics notes. She asks if Lee was someone who hummed while she studied. She asks if Lee would have taken the lot to cut 2 minutes off in rain. The mother answers in sentences with well-behaved ends, because wrenching open doors gets easier when you've had to do it too often. For exactly 6 seconds by the judge's clock, the socks and exams photograph appears again, and it is both too much and just enough. The suspect stares at the table. He has made an altar of it, and it refuses to bless him. In the corridor, after, the mother sits with the detective, and their silences link like fingers. He shows her the bus stub he delivered the night before and says the lab found oil trace from a turnstile, graphite, specific to a model retired years ago, and that trace sits on the stub like a fingerprint of routine. She nods, eyes dry because oceans have to pick their times. She did that move, the mother says, a small dip she demonstrates with her wrist, to tuck the stub under her thumb so she wouldn't drop it. She performs it once, the choreography of a life. The detective feels the peculiar ache that only tiny truths cause. He does not write it down. He would rather keep one thing unpapered. Then the ripple, a rumor that a box is missing. Property calls with an inventory disparity, the kind that makes managers materialize and prosecutors evacuate blood. Everyone descends. The box is not missing. The label fell off. The tape curled. Time talks and pranks when you don't have patience for jokes. The detective laughs once like a man refusing to bargain with panic. He retapes the label himself. He writes the number in black marker large enough for the future to read, even with a headache. Defense tries one last door, alternative suspect theory. They gesture at a man who left the province after the winter, whose name appears twice on a pager log and once in a rumor about factions and flyers. They dangle politics like it's still a good cloak. The prosecutor lets them exhaust the cape and then steps forward with the small knife of sequence. He was at a wedding in Parle, she says, produces a photo with a timestamp and a cake no one can forget, and the alternative evaporates like breath on a mirror. The jury watches the science of subtraction done cleanly. Doubt is a tool. Handled right, it makes edges sharper. Handled wrong, it turns hands slippery. The judge instructs them to ignore what cannot be held in a palm, to hold tight to what leaves residue. He avoids poetry and lands in it anyway. You will decide, he says, if the pressure of the past presses here. He doesn't mean to echo the lab's phrase. He does. Words have been listening too. Night advances down the mountain like a verdict you can't rush. The city hums in the key of weary. The tuck shop locks up early, not out of fear, just to let the dark have its shift. The retired constable walks the long way to his car, detouring by habit along the storm channel's fence. He stands until the wind stops performing and begins simply to be. He says don't to the water, quiet. Not to command it, water doesn't obey, but to honor the syllable that turned into a compass. In holding, the cousin stares at the cinder block wall and whispers numbers that aren't dates. They are years he expects to hear. In another cell, the coworker breathes through a panic that arrives like a wrong knock on the door. The suspect lies back and looks for a crack on the ceiling that might map his way out and finds none. In a small flat, the mother tucks the bus stub into a frame behind a photograph no one will notice has more thickness than it ought to, a secret reliquary for logistics. Jury is sent home with instructions to keep their lives small for a few nights. One takes the long route that avoids a barber where boys once whistled. One crosses the seam in the paving and feels foolish and then relieved and cannot explain why. One stops at the ocean and lets the wind do its clumsy blessing, salt, cold, noise. The city does not sleep, not really. It idles with the lights off. Back in the war room, the board is almost tidy. A sacrilege and a kindness. Arrows have endpoints. Stickies have been consolidated into stacks. Who else keeps its question mark like a candle kept burning past ritual? The detective stands alone and rehearses the coming day in his head, not the opera of verdicts, the prose of summations. He hears the prosecutor's cadence, hears the defense's final desperate architecture, hears the judge intone the boring music that holds dangerous things secure. He hears one more thing, the sound he has waited to hear since a winter he can no longer pretend isn't in his bones. It is not cheering, it is not weeping, it is a chair pushed back by someone standing to say a name out loud without it hurting the room. Outside, a late bus exhales at the stop and doors sigh open. A student steps down, blue backpack, not a rucksack, modern zips with modern teeth, and crosses the concrete without fear, because fear is an inheritance you can refuse if enough people carry it for you long enough. The fence hums its new, duller note. The seam receives another day's footsteps and keeps its counsel. The mountain watches without blinking. The ocean rehearses. The wind reads from the old script, but with less confidence. And somewhere in the courthouse, behind a door on springs, 12 chairs wait. They always did. What's different now is the city's breathing. It's steadier. It's ready for the next thing that matters. A sentence that isn't just words.